Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you will be joining me soon. Good evening. Now, tonight we are going to be diving into a situation that could have global consequences, not just for the Middle East, but for the Caribbean and the wider world. Right now, tensions are escalating in and around the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical choke points on Earth. Roughly 20% of the world's oil passes through the narrow corridor. Any disruption here doesn't stay regional. It sends shockwaves through global energy prices, shipping, and economies everywhere. Here's what's unfolding. The United States, under President Donald Trump, has moved to impose what is being described as a blockade on Iranian ports. So that's something that we have to watch. That's a serious escalation. Iran is responding just as firmly, making it clear they will not enter any peace agreement unless that blockade is lifted. At the same time, a fragile ceasefire is hanging by a thread, set to expire this Wednesday. And Trump is signaling that he may not extend it, raising fears that this could quickly spiral into open confrontation. Meanwhile, the Vatican has stepped in. The Pope is calling for an end to the violence and urging restraint. But Trump has pushed back publicly, saying the Pope should remain in his religious sphere and allow political leaders to handle geopolitical decisions. So, what we're looking at tonight is a collision of power, diplomacy, religion, and global economics, all centered around one of the most strategic waterways on the planet. And the big question is this: are we heading toward a controlled standoff or the early stages of a wider conflict? Join me this afternoon, or tonight rather, is Mr. Corbin, and we're going to break down this from every angle: the geopolitical waves and the shockwaves that we're seeing around the world, the economic fallout, and what this could mean for smaller regions like the Caribbean and depend heavily rather on stable global energy markets. Stay with us, and Mr. Corbin will be joining us now. Let me have him on the stage. Good afternoon, Mr. Corbin. Good evening.
Good evening, Andrew. How are you?
I'm doing very well, sir. And you, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic, my brother.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, no, we are in such a very, very, dangerous situation. We are seeing back and forth, and Trump is saying one thing, the Iranians are saying another thing. Yet, what we don't understand, Mr. Corbin, is this sort of negotiation. We know that Iran is saying that they have a right, which they do, to produce, to make nuclear weapons, and to have their uranium there. So, what is this back and forth? Could you share with us? Is this all a game, or because what are they negotiating if Iran is suggesting that they are not willing to budge in terms of, producing nuclear weapons?
Well, I think to be clear for all of our audience is that Iran is not negotiating on the manufacture of nuclear weapons. Has nothing to do with nuclear weapons.
Well, okay, so what are they
What
discussing?
what Iran is negotiating is the sovereign right for the enrichment of uranium for power generation and peaceful purposes, medical, energy, and nuclear sciences research for agriculture and chemical manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
Uranium 238, or uranium 235, which is then enriched to uranium 238 and uranium hexafluoride, are the stable components that are used in a plethora
Mm-hmm.
of industrial chemicals and industrial applications, and for the calibration and the ability for certain chemicals to be formulated, and it is also used for agriculture and the production of certain components for agricultural fertilizer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Iran's Ayatollah Ali Khamenei issued a fatwa in 2003,
Mm-hmm.
a fatwa which is an Islamic order an order under Islamic law, that nuclear weapons will not be produced by Iran and are banned from its use
Mhm.
in 2003. Iran has never pursued the ability to manufacture nuclear weapons, but what it has pursued and has done that with an excellence that has never been matched before anywhere in the world is to be able to produce the delivery vehicles in missile technology for a nuclear warhead. Now, Iran currently holds in its possession 800 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. It only takes probably about 6 to 12 weeks of further enrichment to 90% to produce uranium hexafluoride,
Mhm.
which can then be married to a plutonium core and then be encased into a warhead, or a warhead that carries multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles, what we call MIRVs. In other words, when you launch a missile, the missile will travel into space, and then as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere, the warhead will separate into 6 or 8 different multiple warheads that can target independent targets. That's what's known as multiple independent re-entry vehicles. Iran has never allowed anyone, and will never allow anyone or any country or nation under any circumstances whatsoever to gain possession of its enriched uranium. That has been clearly outlined by Iran's foreign minister, and it has also been clearly outlined by the supreme leader of Iran, the current
Mhm.
Ayatollah Mahdi Khamenei.
Mhm.
At this particular point in time, the negotiations that are going on between Iran, well, the pseudo negotiations, because you can't call it negotiations when you have two real estate idiots trying to negotiate what should be a Secretary of State or foreign diplomat environment.
Mhm.
Okay, Tweedledum and Tweedledee,
Mhm.
Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff,
Mhm.
are the chosen, pretty much dumbasses that have been put in place in order to be able to try to make some foreign policy work. It does not work. Okay.
Mhm.
So, as far as I'm concerned, and I think the rest of the world will agree with my opinion, that these two idiots have absolutely no knowledge of Iran. They have never been to Iran. They have never spent any time in the country. They know nothing of its Persian ideology. They know nothing of its 5,000-year history. They know nothing of its political system. And most importantly, they know nothing of the Persian sovereignty that exists within the soul of its people. Thereby, you have the recipe for a catastrophic defeat, strategic defeat, which has already taken place. Right now, Trump is just grabbing at straws. The United States military and Israel are grabbing at straws, trying to make something out of something, trying to make a mountain out of a molehill. But at the end of the day, Iran stands in a sovereign strategic position, whereby it controls the Strait of Hormuz, which is entirely within its international legal right because it's in its territorial waters, and its closest ally, which is Oman, controls the western half of the Strait of Hormuz. At
Mhm.
this particular point in time, Trump's failed blockade, which still hasn't worked. They only managed to, yes, well, earlier this morning they seized an Iranian tanker. They
Mhm.
shot its engine out by naval gunfire and disabled the vessel. Then they boarded it, and U.S. Marines are now in possession of an Iranian ship. As far as I'm concerned, that is an addition to the act of war of declaring a blockade. A naval
Mhm.
blockade is an act of war against a country.
It
And
is.
under the UN Charter, the sovereignty of a nation's vessels falls under an act of aggression or an act of war.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, the situation has now escalated to the point where Iran will be forced to respond, because now you have an Iranian crew and you have an Iranian vessel that has fallen into enemy hands. Now, what response can we expect from Iran, given that the United States of America has now publicly and legitimately broken the ceasefire because they fired on an Iranian vessel? Okay, they're the ones that have broached the ceasefire. This has nothing to do with Netanyahu and Lebanon right now, because Netanyahu broke the ceasefire 2 hours after it was implemented by the Pakistani foreign ministry by bombing Lebanon. So the situation at this point in time now comes down to what will be the response by Iran, given the fact that one of its vessels has been shot, disabled, boarded, and occupied.
Well, the Western media is also reporting that Iran also attacked their ships, their vessels, and that is the back and forth that we're hearing. Now,
And they
you
had
opened
every
up
right
by
to do that. They had
yes,
every right to do that.
you opened up by saying that it's a phony negotiation.
Yeah.
Now, I believe so too. I agree 100% with you. So why is Iran understanding what is happening in the United States now that the United States is no longer under any, what do you call it, illusion of diplomacy? That is yesteryear. They're not, engaging nations through diplomacy anymore. It's through military might. I think that the nations now understand that this is the new age of the United States. So why is Iran engaged in negotiations, in this phony negotiations?
Well, I think that the reason that Iran took part in these negotiations, and this has been echoed by geopolitical analysts around the world,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is that Pakistan is a close ally of Iran, and
Yes.
The Chinese government um, and the foreign ministry of China, under the direction of Wang Yi, the foreign minister of China, influence the Pakistani foreign ministry to get in touch with the command of the IRGC and ask a simple question: are you willing to meet and potentially discuss certain points for a tentative ceasefire that could be expanded into a long-term ceasefire in order to save the lives of the second Gaza in Lebanon?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And because Iran is currently the key sponsor on the axis of resistance with Hezbollah, they agreed. Okay. The problem is that it was only after then the Pakistani foreign minister told the Iranian foreign minister that they will be meeting with the vice president of the United States of America, J.D. Vance,
Mm-hmm.
who under Trump's direction had called for the ceasefire. The United
Mm-hmm.
States of America called for the ceasefire, communicated with the Chinese as such, and Wang Yi then got in touch with the foreign minister of Iran, Mr. Arachi, and then they had a discussion with the foreign minister of Pakistan, and a tentative agreement was put in place for a meeting in Islamabad.
Mm-hmm.
15 minutes into the meeting with Vice President Vance in Islamabad, who should come walking into the room but Tweedledum and Tweedledee? Jared
Yeah.
Kushner and Steve Witkoff.
And Steve Witkoff. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And from the time that happened, the telephone calls between J.D. Vance and Washington and Netanyahu began. Now, in speaking directly to Professor Syed Morandai from Tehran, who is one of our podcast members,
Yes.
We speak to him almost every other day.
Yes.
He has said to us that he was part of the delegation that when he was not in the room during the discussions, but he was part of the delegation in support of the Iranian delegation, which numbered 73 people. There were 5 different teams on the Iranian delegation, which were covering everything from the economic side to agriculture to maritime to aviation, everything. Everybody had their own dossiers of documents of discussion with regard to a ceasefire and how it would affect the cross section of Iran's economic sphere.
Mm-hmm.
Tweedledum and Tweedledee and J.D. Vance turned up with just their phones. No documentation, no delegation, no nothing. They walked into the room completely unprepared. So that's why they had to be on the phone calling Trump or calling Netanyahu. And Netanyahu then boasted after the meeting that that J.D. Vance was calling him for advice.
Yes.
So
Yes.
who actually is running the show?
The United States. Not that you have for me. The United States is running the show. But what is happening, as you're suggesting, is that all of this is drama. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with the reality. And
No.
what is happening is that the United States, is pretending as if they want to enter into negotiations when they don't want to, because they want what they want, and Iran is not willing to give them what they want. So, but they can give the Western world the illusion that at least we were trying to negotiate with Iran, and Iran, is a rogue state, and that is the sort of impression that they're giving to the world. So, but I think that the United States, as we could see what happened in Venezuela, many times Maduro wanted to, of course, engage Trump, and Trump, pretended as if he were engaging Maduro, and then behind the scenes, we saw what happened. He was bombing, and then he eventually kidnapped the president. So I think all of what we're seeing is just total, drama, theater, and we don't know what is really going on. Because what I would like to pose to you, as you're suggesting, I think you've also explained it, some of it already, that what are they really negotiating? I think you started out with that. Because oftentimes the Western media hides what they're really negotiating is on the table specifically, and then we hear that, oh, it didn't work out and they had to bomb. Right, but I think the next thing, because the USSR, this US Gerald, that ship there, the USSR Gerald, is it Ford?
Yeah.
It's not there in that region for for no purpose. It's there for some purpose, and it's to engage in war. What do you think?
Well, to your last point about the USS Gerald R. Ford, the USS Gerald R. Ford was actually struck by a supersonic drone
Hmm.
in the West Arabian Sea,
Yes.
and is now currently in in Crete,
Mm.
where it has to be put into a dry dock in order to undergo
Mm.
repairs.
Right.
The
Right.
drone struck a part of the ship which was immediately below what's known as the ship's husbandry department, which
Hmm.
destroyed two-thirds of the husbandry department and wiped out um, a number of key hydraulics and so on, which control the launch and the recovery. Sorry, control the recovery of aircraft. So
Hmm.
it could not launch any aircraft if it couldn't recover them. If they launched the aircraft, they would have to go to shore bases, could not come back to the ship. So that withdrew to into Crete to be put into dry dock temporarily for repairs. Then since been replaced by the George H.W. Bush, which is still in transit to the region. And the
Hmm.
USS Abraham Lincoln was also struck by 4 drones, and that had
Mm.
to withdraw for repairs into India. So Iran has sent a very clear message to the United States Navy. You come any closer, and the hypersonics will be employed, and we will put an aircraft
Yes.
carrier on the bottom of the Indian Ocean.
Yes.
To your first point with regard to what the smoke and mirrors of the so-called negotiations are happening.
Hmm.
This is a war of attrition that the Israeli regime and the Zionist regime have dragged the United States of America into to fight on their behalf.
Yes.
For 30 years, Netanyahu has preached and demonized Iran as being a nuclear capable nation, capable of destroying the eastern seaboard of the United States of America, and also the capable of destroying Israel and all the rest of the Middle East, and that they're a murderous nation, and so on and so on ad infinitum. 30
Hmm.
years of rhetoric.
Yes.
Nothing has ever been come of it. Nothing has ever produced of it. All that has happened for that 30 years is that Israel has continued to be the belligerent neighbor to all of the Middle Eastern countries, and has hammered its control and stamped its military authority on oppressing Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, and whoever else it can get its hands on. That's
Hmm.
the bottom line. This
Hmm.
is a war of resources.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
this is a
Yes.
war of
Yes.
resources
Hmm.
because
Because
it supports Israel's Greater Israel Project. Now, let me explain what the Greater Israel Project is. The Greater Israel Project was put in place in 2009 when a document was written in the United States Military Department of Defense called Clean Break. This was the reevaluation of the realm that Israel wanted to achieve for the Greater Israel Project, whereby they would create the scenario for 7 major Middle East wars, which would see the expansion of territory by Israel to encompass Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Turkey. All of it, and Jordan. All of it. That's the Greater Israel Project. What we see happening right now, and this is a scenario that a lot of people have not seen
When
happen.
was that document? When was that document written? You're saying the Greater
In two,
Israel Project?
yeah, in 2009. I'm gonna
Yeah,
I'm
but
gonna
but yeah, but we have the project for the New American Center written from the 1990s of the United States military industrial complex
Yeah,
to
that
gain
has nothing to do with the
right.
Greater Israel Project.
But it might not. Well, I think it's connected. Why it's
Yes,
connected?
it would
Because
be politically,
everything
yes.
that we're seeing happening in the Middle East is exactly what is Israel is doing and what the United States is doing. So what I'm saying here is that we have seen this war in Iran has been in the works for over 50 years. We know that before the British actually left the scene, the United States was also working with them. That was of course, the time when they went under Mossadegh, when they actually dethroned him. So the fact of the matter is that this has been an ongoing project, and they are actually using Israel as the puppet. The fact of the matter is that there are many agendas, as you can see, in this one war, because one of the agendas too is for the Vatican to reign supreme from that era, from the Middle East. So this is a religious war too. It's an economic war, as you're saying, for resources. It's a religious war in terms of which religion is going to control that hemisphere. It's also political in terms of who is going to end up ruling the world. So it's a war. It's many agendas within one agenda. But I agree with you that Israel also has its own agenda. But the U.S.
Yes,
has, the Vatican
as I
also.
as I was saying about the Greater Israel Project. The Greater Israel
Yes.
Project began in 2003. If you look in the chat, I've just posted the link to that document.
Mm-hmm.
And that document outlines everything that you see playing out currently in the Middle East. The next country on the list after Iran in Israel's mind is Turkey.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now this scenario can be viewed in two ways. This can be viewed from the position that Iran is being supported by the two the second and the third largest nuclear powered nations, which is
Mm-hmm.
China and Russia.
Right.
China and Russia have signed a strategic defense cooperative agreement with Iran, which states very clearly that they will come to the assistance of Iran if nuclear weapons are used against it.
Mm-hmm.
This sends a very clear message to Israel that if you use nuclear weapons against Iran, we will turn your country into a glass parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what does this say to the situation that is being played out? Lots of people look at this situation, and it has some validity. I'm not saying that it is the scenario that will end up being this way, because we don't know enough about it. But one of the scenarios and one of the hypotheses with regard to this is that the Iranians are being used to evict the United States of America from the Middle East, so that the hegemonic power of Israel can take over those countries that then fall as a result of the power vacuum that is the result of the United States being removed. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if you look at the 7 GCC countries, which are the Gulf Cooperative countries, Gulf Cooperation Council countries, so you have the United Arab Emirates, you have the Bahrain, you have the Dubai, all of these small little kingdoms and so on, which are basically Qatar, all of them. If the United States of America pulls out of there, those countries will fall,
Mm-hmm.
because the United States of
Yes.
America has propped these countries up through economic means and so on and so forth. If the
Mm-hmm. And
United States is
protection.
evicted, if the United States is evicted from the region,
Mm-hmm.
all of that would fall to either Saudi Arabia or Israel.
Yes.
Now, in the last 24 hours, a very interesting turn of events has taken place in the Iranian um, Persian Gulf area, and that is Saudi Arabia and the Foreign Ministry of Iran held a conference call this morning. Okay, And there's a reason behind that. Mohammed bin Salman, who is the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, who is currently leading Saudi Arabia, he was publicly embarrassed by Donald Trump. And he issued very clear instructions following that public embarrassment that Saudi Arabia will be terminating political relations with the United States of America and with the military industrial complex. Now, what does this mean for the United States of America? It means a termination of approximately $3 trillion going into the military industrial complex, and puts Trump on the back foot simply because he was depending on that $3 trillion to come in to shore up his domestic situation at home. Saudi Arabia has canceled that. Saudi Arabia is now speaking to Iran's foreign ministry, which points in one direction. Saudi Arabia is hurting really, really badly because every single United States and Saudi Arabian airbase in the eastern region of the country has been virtually obliterated by Iranian missiles. In addition to that, 17 of the 21 oil refineries that Saudi Arabia actually hold as producing hydrocarbons for Western consumption have been severely damaged, with their production capability reduced to less than 20%. So Saudi Arabia is hemorrhaging cash real bad. Okay.
Yes.
And they're in a position now where they have to make a decision. They have to make a decision. They either negotiate with Iran or suffer the consequences of harboring United States forces. And I personally believe that, given Donald Trump's public embarrassment of MBS, that Saudi Arabia is going to negotiate with Iran for a permanent cessation of strikes on Saudi Arabian territory, and will come to the table for a negotiated settlement, not necessarily a peace agreement, a negotiated settlement where Saudi Arabian tankers and Saudi Arabian vessels can transit the Red Sea without being interdicted by the Houthis in Yemen, who have joined the war on Iran's side. So now the Arabian Triangle has been set, where the Suez Canal, the Bab al-Mandeb, and the Straits of Hormuz are now under the control of Iran and its proxy. Because if you close the Bab al-Mandeb, the Suez Canal is impotent. Now, what does this mean for Saudi Arabia? This paralyzes Saudi Arabia entirely because it does not have a coastline or ports on the Mediterranean. It has ports on the Red Sea and on the Persian Gulf via Kuwait. Yeah. Now, when you paralyze a country of that size, and you actually take 60% of their income out of operation within 48 hours, you send a very, very clear message geopolitically, not only to the leadership of that country, but you also send a very, very clear message to the financial structure of a country that is dependent on oil exports to the rest of the world. So where do we go from here? The situation comes down to this. A structured settlement with Iran and the Houthis to allow Saudi Arabia to export under certain conditions. We don't know what those conditions are going to be, but that's the way I see it.
Yeah, if the ceasefire expires Wednesday, and that's what they're suggesting, that there's going to be, that is what happened. That's the agreement, the extent of the agreement, that it's going to expire on Wednesday. What do you think is going to happen next in practical terms? Are we looking at immediate military confrontation or slower economic squeeze?
Well, I think that the economic realities are starting to come home to the world very, very pointedly at this point in time. And when you see countries like Australia actually flying a delegation to Malaysia and Indonesia to negotiate for purchases of hydrocarbons, that tells you everything you need to know. Australia is virtually down to 5 days of fuel supply for its major cities. Transportation across the country has virtually halted. And for an island continent the size of Australia to be in a situation like that is unheard of. In addition to that, New Zealand is even in greater straits they have actually had to halt all of their commercial transportation, ground transportation in every direction. Now, the the Malaysian government, who owns the national oil company Petronas, they can supply Australia no problem at all. The question in my mind is, why haven't they? Why haven't they been doing it all along? They maybe have, but why would you have to fly a delegation all the way from Sydney, Australia, to Kuala Lumpur in order to be able to negotiate purchases of hydrocarbons? Who were you buying it from before? Well, it's
Mm-hmm.
obvious. They were buying it out of the Persian Gulf because they were getting it at discounted petrodollar prices. Now
Mm-hmm.
they've got to pay the Malaysians at spot price, on the market, which is $98 a barrel. They weren't, you're no longer getting a 62. Okay, so if hostilities continue, and I don't think we're going to make it to Wednesday. I believe that Trump is going to pull the trigger sometime on Monday night or Tuesday. And
I think so.
if he is foolish enough to follow through with his ridiculous statement about attacking all of Iran's electrical
Force.
generation infrastructure
Yes,
and
and
ports,
yes.
the
Mm-hmm.
entire Persian Gulf region from Kuwait in the north all the way to Dubai and all of those countries, including the ports on the eastern Mediterranean, which is Haifa, Tartus, Alexandria, and Cyprus, will be attacked because
Yeah.
Iran 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 can launch, several long range hypersonic missiles into those ports and hit key installations. That it doesn't destroy all of the infrastructure, but it renders the port unoperational.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
How long? Yeah. Mhm. Go ahead.
the situation is a very dire one. If you turn the lights out in the Middle East at this particular point in time, you will have a mass exodus from the region. And why is that? Well, let's look very carefully at this particular time of year. This is late April.
Mm-hmm.
The Middle East is now going into its summer. You cannot exist in that region without air conditioning because the temperatures are 140 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm speaking from personal experience because I've been
Mm-hmm.
in Iran at that time of year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I've been in Iran in July, and the heat is oppressive. And I mean oppressive. You cannot physically be outside for any longer than 30 minutes. You cannot. Now,
Yeah, but
a lot of people think that I'm joking when when I said that I could crack an egg on the bonnet of my car and fry it.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
that's an actual fact. Okay.
yes,
In
yes.
addition to that, the further south in Iran you go, particularly in that area of the Strait of Hormuz, which has the high Magaz Mountains to the south, stretching all the way to the Pakistani border, that creates um, a unique environment in itself and creates its own weather simply because it's in rain shadow. So get convection happening and you get severe humidity and high winds. So very hot, high winds coming off the ocean, okay, as a result of the mountain ranges that are hemmed in and the heat from the desert behind it, the Lura desert from behind it. Okay. Now, if you've ever been to Iran, and I would highly recommend that those who are considering visiting that country do so at the time of year where you're not going to be affected by such heat. Go in February or March in springtime.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, but at the end of the day, Iran has a change of weather that is going to completely take control of the overall position in relation to how operations, whether militarily or commercially, will be carried out. And if you turn off the power in all of the GCC countries, as well as Saudi Arabia, those people will leave en masse.
Mm-hmm.
Europe will be inundated. Other countries around the region will be inundated with people just getting out. Because if you hit a major power station in Dubai or Qatar, Bahrain, or the UAE, you are going to have serious problems. In addition to that, the time frame for repairing it. You can't get a large power station back online just by going and closing a couple of switches and doing some repairs and getting it back up and running. When a power station is bombed, either by hypersonic missiles or regular explosives, it takes months to get it back online. So you're looking at a 2-year period of no power. So
Yeah, but
think
what
carefully
is
about what you're going to do.
yes? What if the global agenda is not to have it fixed? What is it if they're restructuring, re-engineering, and they will have to get rid of the current systems that we operate on? Is that part of the agenda? As bad as it sounds, and it's horrific, but is that within their own plans and they don't care?
Well, when you look at the overall mentality of these psychopaths who have put the new world order and the global agenda for transhumanism in place, you ask yourself the question whether the whole green agenda and renewable energy and so on will actually be what the reason behind why this war is happening.
Yeah.
Well, the reason that I have absolutely no confidence in anything to do with renewable energy or the green agenda is that you can't put any of those green agenda or renewable energy projects in place unless you have the manufacturing capacity to do
Hmm.
so. And that calls for hydrocarbons. All right. Now, Iran, as the game changer in the region right now,
Hmm.
is a country with what is known as strategic depth. And what
Yes.
do I mean by strategic depth? Strategic depth is that it's 1.6 million square miles and it has 153 underground cities capable of sustaining a population of 20 to 40,000 each.
Mm.
These cities are located 1,500 meters underground, fully sustainable, have their own water supply, their food supply, they have manufacturing capability. All of Iran's missile manufacturing capability has been carried out underground since 2006.
Hmm.
Now, Iran's strategic depth comes very prominently to the fore because it can sustain its own cities from within these underground cities. So people ask the question, Trump is saying that doesn't have a military anymore. They don't have this, they don't have that. We bombed out everything and we don't have anything more to bomb. Well, guess what? All you've done is that you've hit empty buildings above ground. That's all you've done. All you've done is take down old infrastructure. You haven't changed what you set out to do. That is regime changed. That's still
Hmm.
underground. Not only that, the strategic depth that Iran actually has at its disposal is the ability to coordinate through 31 separate directorates and a mosaic of command and control that takes the country from one step of continued operation progressively up the ladder. So it doesn't matter how much you want to escalate, Iran will match you step for step. That is strategic depth. If you don't have strategic depth, and the United States of America nor Israel have any strategic depth because they're depending on long logistics chain by air and by sea coming into the Mediterranean, flying from England, Germany, and so on, coming into the region. You only have to interdict 2 air bases right now to stop that logistics chain dead in its tracks, and that is RAF Akrotiri and the Egyptian air base at at in just outside of Cairo.
Hmm.
Boom,
Yeah.
it's done. 2 air bases. That's all you have to do. You just have to destroy those two, and the logistics chain come to a halt simply because you are now forced to land in Greece and transport everything across the Mediterranean by sea in order to get to an Israeli port, and the Mediterranean can be interdicted very easily.
Well, I like what you're saying, but what we're looking at and what we're seeing certainly under the Trump administration, and we can see the same, what we call it now, the same blueprint in Venezuela. You
Mhm.
don't necessarily need regime change. What
Yeah.
you need is a government that is compliant with U.S. interests, and you just have the government there. And that is what they're trying to do. I think the Trump administration, even though it's a bad administration, it doesn't want to necessarily blow up places if it has not to. If you decide not to listen to it and to do whatever it wants, then it's going to blow you up. But so I think that when we say negotiations, that's what they're seeking. They're trying now to get a government that can give the United States what it wants. So
Never
it's not
happen.
total regime change. It's just a government that is compliant to U.S.
It will
interests.
never happen. Never happen. It will never happen. Sorry.
How do you know that? How would you be able
I'll tell you
to?
the reason why I say that. And the
Mhm.
reason I say that is this. If you look at the structure of, and then this is one of the reasons why, the United States of America, as well as the Western world, will never understand Iran.
They don't want to.
Those, no,
That's the whole thing. They
no.
don't want to.
The only reason that they don't want to understand Iran is because they've never been there.
Yes, but
You
and that
ask
is true.
anyone. You ask anyone in the United States foreign policy, in the foreign office, or in the British foreign office, if
Mhm.
well, the British would say yes because they've had people stationed there for ages, and there are a couple of
Yes,
people in the U.S. embassy that are in Tehran, but
right.
they're not in the negotiation table.
Cool.
The most important thing is the United States of America and the Western world knows nothing
Mm-hmm.
of Iranian management and governance structure.
Mm-hmm.
Iran is governed not only on its ideology of its Shia Muslim heritage, but it has decentralized its governance into the 31 directorates in a mosaic, where each directorate will and has operated and does operate within a separate, independent sphere of command and control, as well as socio-domestic operations within communities that it's assigned to. So if you
Yes.
take Iran and you divide it into 31 different sectors, every single one of those sectors is an independent control mechanism, all achieving the best for that particular sector.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot put a compliant government in place when the ideology behind the mosaic of control throughout those directorates is diametrically opposed to Western ideology. Will
Mm-hmm.
never happen. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot get a compliant government to Western control in Iran. It is not possible. The
Yeah,
only
it's
way you would
not.
do that, the only way that you
Mhm.
could accomplish that is if by some miracle you could completely eradicate every single person in the country of 91 million people. And that's not going to happen either.
I don't know if they want to blow up everybody or the majority of the people there. I think that what they want, if they perhaps can, is to blow up the government itself, because the
Never
people,
happen.
of course, the people itself are not, even Western world here, we're not in control of anything. So much less the Iranians. They're just not. We just have this notion that we are, and I'm sure the Iranians have that they are in control, but they're not. So the government is what the United States is looking at, and that is what it has its attention on. Now
Yeah.
we don't know if because all of this thing doesn't have to do with only governance; it has to do with economic interests. And what we see in the world now is that our governments sometimes sell us out for economic interests. If it melds in their jars in their own favor. So it is possible in terms of as far as economics are concerned, but certainly as governance, I can agree with what you're saying. But the wars are doesn't have anything to do with governance and good governance. It has to do with economic interests,
Well,
profits, and
if there is a division within the IRGC, the division within that IRGC structure would quickly be identified and quelled, because you would have to corrupt all 31 directorates, and that's not going to happen. So in order to create a division in the government, you could have two cells or two directorates that decide to go rogue and talk to the Western powers and so on, and try to sell out the rest. They will be quickly overwhelmed and dealt with, and that has been proven in the last round, when the United States and Israel decided to preempt a color revolution in the country by promoting riots and revolution and so on in the country, and sponsoring Mossad terrorists and so on, and other terrorists from areas outside of Iran, to try and overthrow the country through riotous protests. If there were collaborators, and there were many Iranian collaborators from many different areas within the country, every single one of them was arrested and in custody within 48 hours, simply because the
Mhm,
system works.
mhm,
There is no way. that if one or two of those directorates of the 31 directorates goes rogue, that the others would be able to be influenced negatively. And the only way
Hmm.
that you would get negative influence of all 31 is if you were able to prove that you could kill every single one within a period of 6 months.
Hmm.
Now,
Hmm.
Iran Iran, and the geography of Iran is in such a is designed or has been created in a way where even if you were to drop several nuclear weapons around the country and take out every major city from Mashdad in the east all the way to Shiraz in the south, and Isfahan and Tehran and Qom and all the rest of those cities,
Yes.
you still would not impact the regime to the point of total collapse. All you
Hmm.
would do is that you would kill a tremendous amount of civilians. You would create a radiated nightmare, a radiation nightmare, and
Yeah.
you would create an environment where you, as the oppressor bombing the country, still wouldn't be able to operate. So
Hmm.
what would be the point? Simply because you can't get underground. There is no nuclear weapon known to man, currently known to man, even if it was mounted on a hypersonic vehicle that can penetrate 1,500 meters of solid granite.
Hmm. Hmm.
In addition to that, the
Hmm.
most important thing you have to remember is that Iran's self sustaining underground cities cannot be corrupted through aerial warfare. And as long as you cannot corrupt that through aerial warfare, you have the ability to sustain your operation indefinitely. And Iran is in this war for the long haul. They have been preparing for this for 40 years.
Hmm.
Okay? The United
The
States,
Western Hemisphere too. They've been a period for the past 50 years, as I'm
yes.
suggesting. So this is nothing
Well,
that is new
no,
for
no.
them.
The Western world has not prepared for a war in Iran since since it was first tabled. They have talked about it. The only
And
reason
they
that they
have
have
been studying, and they have been studying it. They have been studying. Why do you think I don't think the United States, for example, when the United States went into Iraq, according to the Project for the New American Century, I thought Iran was next, and many analysts were saying Iran was next. But obviously, what took place in Iraq, they realized that they could not just go into Iran because Iran would have been more of a challenge than Iraq. So they went into places like Syria, and look how long it took them in Syria to actually remove that president, that regime. So the United States will remain there, even though it suffers and it's painful. It will remain there as in Syria as long as it accomplishes its goal, its objective. Terrible disaster will be left behind, but they're prepared for it. They don't care. They don't even care if Iran should bomb the West. They don't care too, do they?
well, just to correct you on one point, on several points actually. Number one, the United States of America is going to be leaving Syria shortly. I'll tell you the reason why. The Western promoted ISIS terrorist that they promoted as a prime minister
Mm-hmm.
is now talking to Iran.
Mm-hmm.
So he's actually turned around and stabbed them in their back. In
Mm-hmm.
addition to that, the only US forces that are left in Syria are in the very north of the country on the Kurdish Turkish border, where they can skip across the Turkish border and the first signs of trouble. Point number two, every single United States military personnel is now out of Iraq. They're no longer in Iraq. None,
Mm-hmm.
not even NATO. The Green Zone, the US Embassy, everybody, they're gone. They're no longer there. Third point, every single United States serviceman, as well as military bases in Kuwait, are currently unoccupied simply because they have been destroyed. The eviction notice has been issued and it's currently being carried out. And the most important thing to remember is this: the United States of America and Israel can bomb Iran from now for the next 3 or 4 years continuously. It will change nothing. Okay? History has proven that aerial bombardment only hardens the resolve of the people of the nation of which you are carrying out the action. This was proven in Germany. This was proven in Vietnam. This was proven in Korea. It was proven in Iraq. It was proven in Panama. It was proven all around the world where air power does not change anything. All it does, it takes down infrastructure, but it hardens the resolve of the people.
Well, we see a more compliant Panama now, so I'm not sure if that change resolved the Panamanians because Panama is now compliant with the U.S. They may have hard, they may talk a lot of rhetoric and stuff. At the end of the day, they do what the United States wants them to do, aren't they?
Well, they don't. They currently don't have a choice because Panama doesn't necessarily have an air force. It doesn't have really that much of a navy, and it
Right.
doesn't have a very large military. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
not only that, but the United States of America is who put Panama on the map by building the Panama Canal. So
Mm-hmm.
naturally, Panama will acquiesce to that. Then it matters not that the ports on either end are owned by China. At the end of the day, the most important thing to remember that what we're dealing with here is we're looking at a situation of global resource management that is being taken in hand by means that are not only going to collapse the global economy, but are going to be sending shockwaves across the production and the prosperity of every single country in the world.
Yes,
Okay?
and so we're not looking at that only though, Fred. We're looking also at a global restructuring of the world's
Yes.
financial infrastructure. So we aren't even sure if some of the Iranians powers that be are also involved in this process, and that's what we have to understand. That even though we're seeing from our lens, we're seeing that there is a war, but behind the scenes, we don't know what the powers are that are actually working together, just like we saw during COVID. And COVID destroyed many of us, as we can see around the world. But we can see at the end of the day that the global elites, they united in that agenda. So they might also, and I think they are, in some parts, not the Iranians now, the global powers that be in Iran, just like in the United States, just like in Barbados and Jamaica, are uniting. Look at, the other day I was reading newspaper, Fred, and Andrew Holness is saying to Jamaicans that you didn't get any relief, this roof program that they have there for the government to fix the roofs of people who, where their houses were collapsed after Hurricane Melissa. He's saying that he can't release the funds because many Jamaicans are unbanked. They're not a part of the formal financial structure. And until they get their IDs or they get some online banking, he won't be able to release the funds. That's what he's saying. And I'm like, little Jamaica, you can't get funds. So how did we used to get funds to people before all of this online thing? Didn't you go and get your MPs to go on the ground and help people to get their lives together? We're seeing this world now. It's not the world that we were living in yesteryear. And certainly our leaders, government, private sectors are working together with Trump, with the Western world, and maybe the Eastern world too, to restructure what we think are normal systems of operation. So I don't know if we can say definitively that some of the Iranians are not involved with Trump, even though we're seeing behind this, well, publicly, they're telling us that there is some war. And yes, it is, just like we had some virus and we had to get rid of it, whatever. But at the end of the day, we know that there was a sinister agenda. And I think likewise in Iran, in the United States and wherever, we're seeing sinister agenda within the agenda that they're telling us. How would you respond to that?
I'm not discounting that there are agendas within agendas because that's the nature of geopolitical affairs.
Correct.
The most important thing to remember for the scenario that we're currently looking at through the optics of a Caribbean vision,
Yes.
the optics of a Caribbean vision, and the scenario that we are witnessing currently in the Middle East is that the United States hegemony within the Caribbean region is going to be reinforced
Yes.
and is going to be built upon in ways that are going to benefit some Caribbean countries and not all. And I believe that, as I said before, the smaller islands of the Caribbean region are going to suffer the most simply because the oil producing nations of the Caribbean right now are Trinidad, which is the oldest oil producing country in the world, first in the world to produce oil,
Hmm. Hmm.
and Guyana, and
Yes.
Jamaica's exploration
Hmm.
is about to kick off, which could be within the next 2 years, hopefully. In other words, the United States of America has bookended the Caribbean region, south and north. We control the United States controls the Panama Canal. It
Mm-hmm.
controls Jamaica, which is a hop, skip, and a jump from Cuba and Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
The reinforcing of the reinforcing of
Yeah.
Haiti at this
Mm-hmm.
particular point in time, which is ongoing, with military equipment and so on, is
Mm-hmm.
virtually
And the DR
preparing
too. Yes. Mm-hmm.
for regime change in in Cuba. I'm of the opinion that
Mm-hmm.
the Cuban government is going to come to a settlement with the United States of America, and there will not be a military operation. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason I say that is this, and I've mentioned this
I
before:
agree. Agree.
the Russian government,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the Chinese government, are currently in a position much as they are in Iran. And Russia's
Mm-hmm.
largest ally in the Caribbean region has been Cuba. Just because Trump decided to take over Venezuela and stop oil tankers from delivering oil doesn't mean that Russia can't deliver oil or China can't deliver oil. Right now, there are three oil tankers in Cuba resupplying the country with oil. So the lights are going to come back on as soon as they can, not for the whole country, but as soon as possible. The reason that we are going to see the increasing presence of the United States of America in the Southern Caribbean, as well, in the Caribbean as a whole, is the overall development of what is known as the North American Technate. The
Mm-hmm.
North American Technate is Colombia, Venezuela, all of Central America, all of the Caribbean, Mexico, the United States, Canada, and Greenland. That is the North American Technate. That
Mm-hmm.
is what Trump's overall agenda to fulfill in order to be able to bring about the complete Zionist control of the Western Hemisphere. And the Western,
That was the United Nations. I actually went online and I didn't know that the United Nations had that agenda for years.
yeah,
So when Trump came and he was suggesting that Greenland, he wants to capture, he wants to buy Greenland and also Canada, people think this is a Trump agenda. This agenda has been in place and is a part of the United Nations agenda for
yeah.
years, if not decades. Okay,
Well,
so it's
what
not a Trump agenda.
the formal launch of the North American Technate was carried out by George Bush
Hmm.
during his presidency. He announced that in a congressional meeting, and the world paid no attention.
And
The world,
Bill Clinton's NAFTA also was all of that was a
yeah,
part
that
of
was
that.
part of the whole program. Yeah, North
Hmm.
American Free Trade Agreement was all part
Hmm.
of that. But
Hmm.
George Bush Jr.
Hmm.
was the person that actually formally announced that the new North American
Union,
um,
yeah.
Union would take place, and
Hmm.
in a congressional announcement. The
Hmm.
most important thing to remember for the Caribbean and where we
Hmm.
live, what we are going
Yes,
to experience, is that
yes.
everybody say, "Oh well, if the Americans are taking over everything, everything is going to be hunky dory." No, no. The reason being is this: America does not control the price of oil just because it produces oil.
Right,
Okay,
right.
America is saying, "Oh well, only 20% of the oil comes through the Straits of Hormuz, and we're self-sufficient on fuel and so on." Um, you haven't got a single barrel of oil out of Venezuela yet. It's going to take you 5 years to do that. Okay. Now, Chevron has just won a contract to expand the Orinoco Belt on the interior of Venezuela. It takes 5 years to drill the first well. You've got to build the infrastructure to get that oil from the interior of Venezuela
Hmm.
to the coastline.
Hmm.
The current export capacity of Venezuela at this particular point in time, using the very old infrastructure that was put in Venezuela in the early 1970s, is currently only 800,000 barrels a day.
Yes.
That can't even fill two oil tankers.
Hmm.
Okay. A standard post Panamax oil tanker takes 5 million barrels of oil in a single shipment. Okay. 5 million. They're only producing 800,000 right now. So
Hmm.
only small tankers are capable of exporting from Venezuela at this point in time. I'm not saying it's going to wouldn't increase very shortly, but the problem that we have is that Trinidad's Petrotrin oil refinery is going to take 4 years to get back online,
Hmm.
and Guyana has no refining capacity.
Yes.
So
Yes.
where does the Caribbean stand with regard to refined hydrocarbons? we are in a serious
U.S.
position
crisis.
because we are going to suffer seriously at the hands
Mm-hmm.
of this misadventure in the Middle East.
Yes.
Now,
Yes. Yes.
where we stand to benefit the most, as I've said
Mhm.
in my last podcast with you, Caribbean governments need to sit down with each other and come to an agreement where we support each other in exploration of oil and gas for the region. Every country in the Caribbean region is sitting on oil and gas reserves simply because stretching from Venezuela all the way past Barbados out into the Atlantic, 250 miles, we are sitting on an ocean of oil.
Yes.
We
Yes.
Barbados sits on the second largest, or the Caribbean basin is the second largest oil reserves, submarine oil reserves in the world,
Wow.
second only to Saudi Arabia and Russia. Okay, and all we have to do, yes, the oil is the same as what you get in Venezuela because it's closer to the equator. It's heavy crude, but the most important thing is this: if we diversify with boutique refining, which can fit on a ship, we can become self-sufficient economically through energy production. We're not in a position where we have then to rely on some indiscriminate bean counter marking up a price just because he doesn't like the administration in Barbados, or I don't like the prime minister in St. Lucia, so I'm going to sell him oil at $15 more per barrel. No, what we need is unity around
Correct.
energy.
Correct.
Unity around energy in the Caribbean. And I take my hat off to Mr. Dickon Mitchell in Grenada for
Hmm.
bringing in a Nigerian oil company and looking very closely at oil and gas exploration for Grenada because he knows that Grenada is sitting on the same oil reserves that we do.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And Mr. Mitchell
Hmm.
is doing the right thing. However, will the United States of America allow him to do that?
Well, the United States of America controls Nigeria. So whatever is
Well, there you go.
happening, so the fact of the matter, that is not going to solve the problem there in Grenada, because whatever happens there, that means that it's under the purview of the United States. In fact, the United States has said anything that happens in the Western Hemisphere, they have control, or they can allow it or disallow it.
Yeah.
So we know what is happening, and we don't have to fool ourselves. But the thing, I was reading an article from Guyana's paper, the Kaitior, this morning. The editor of the paper was saying that the president of Guyana, Dr. Ali, says that he's not interested in even having any negotiations with these oil companies to get more out of the royalties that come from the oil. Now, if your president can say that to his own people, that he's not interested, then who is he representing?
Well, you have to understand who is pulling the strings behind the scenes in Guyana. It's not Irfan
Right,
Ali.
right.
Okay.
That's what I'm. The
It's the
question
guy.
I'm asking. That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, it's the guy who was the last president that's behind the scenes, who is now the vice president of the country and the economic advisor for the country, the minister of finance. Okay, and at the end of the day, you, you this is this is this is tantamount to the fox watching the hen house. Okay,
Yes.
and you have a situation that is sadly um, more corrupt and than anything else with regard to the disenfranchisement of the Guyanese people,
Yes.
simply because the negotiation of a contract for oil reserves to the scale that the Guyana is experiencing in the offshore blocks that it has, where you would sit down and you would allow an oil company to come into your country and negotiate your country, your natural resources at only 3%, when you should be starting at 30% with 5% increase year on every 5 years, is tantamount to organized theft.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
when you have a situation developing where the country is the fastest growing
The economy. Mm-hmm.
economy in the Western Hemisphere, does that
Mm-hmm.
mean that the economy is growing to the benefit of the people, or does that only mean that the economy is growing on the ledger sheet of the oil
Right.
company from which is benefiting from the extraction of sovereign natural resources? That's the question the Guyanese people need to ask their government.
But they know.
Is our economy actually growing at the rate that the global media are telling us, or are only a few people at the top benefiting, and Guyanese are still scrambling for corned beef and biscuits.
But I'm surprised that there are papers there that, to me, based on what I'm reading, when I compare the Gleaner and even what's coming out of Barbados and Trinidad to a lesser extent, I think that the Guyanese papers have been doing a great job, a fantastic job of highlighting what is happening there, the realities, and they're not, prettying the language. They're actually telling you the raw story, the raw reality of what is taking place there. So Guyanese understand, and they're writing beautifully, beautiful language expressed that this is what is happening, but people are not listening to them. And it shows you that people can understand the reality, but what can they do? Do they have the power to change things? And that is what we don't have agency anymore. And this is where the buck stops.
Well, I think that I do agree with you on that point, that the the Guyanese media has been exemplary in its
Mm-hmm.
journalism, and has
It
been
is.
exemplary in actually highlighting the very old adage that the pen is mightier than the sword.
Mm-hmm.
However, we do have a situation where that is developing in that country, where the population can only take so much before the last straw breaks the camel's back. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what happens if an ill advised action is taken against the government, such as a coup, that chases the oil companies out of the country?
Yes.
Are we back to square one? Or are we going to be looking at a situation that takes in hand a properly organized structural development and economic cooperative policy that concentrates on Guyana first?
Yes.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is not evident right now. Now, I'm not saying that there are not plans to do that, because I'm not in government in Guyana. I don't know Mr. Irfan Ali. I only know the vice president of the country marginally, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and so on through other affiliates. But the most important thing to remember here is that Guyana has the potential that no other CARICOM nation has other than
Mm-hmm.
Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
That is to feed the region, to energize the region,
Mm-hmm.
and to educate the region.
Mm-hmm.
And I say educate the region for a reason. Why isn't there a University of West Indies in Guyana?
Mm-hmm.
Because the Guyana University is actually one of the best in the hemisphere. A lot of people have never, ever, ever paid attention to Guyana's University of Education. I
Mm-hmm.
have met many students coming out of Guyana
Mm-hmm.
that are far more highly educated than what the University of West Indies students produce. And I ask
Mm-hmm.
myself the question, why is this? It's very small. It's very small. And some of the
Mm-hmm.
programs are insignificant, almost insignificant. But you know what? They produce high quality people.
That's what we
Now,
need.
exactly. Now, just as an example that a lot of the public don't know, Barbados's top export between 1850 and 1980 was highly educated
Mm-hmm.
Barbadians.
Yeah, Patterson told
That
us about
was
that.
our top export. That
Mm-hmm.
was the top
Mm-hmm.
money making export of Barbados. Not
Mm-hmm.
sugar,
Mm-hmm.
not
Yes.
fish,
Yeah.
okay, not
Mm-hmm.
cocoa.
Mm-hmm.
No, it was highly educated Barbadians.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Jamaica as well. And so Trinidad. Educated West Indians contributed to the global prosperity model like never before between
Mm-hmm.
1850 and 1980. What happened in 1980? The United States of America decided that they were going to exercise their educational hegemonic right to bring about certain changes with regard to education systems, and the whole thing went to hell in a handbasket and is still on a downhill trajectory heading for a brick wall.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why is Guyana different? Because Guyana has a large Indian population. So does Trinidad. And the education that has come across come from India into Guyana and into Trinidad has been completely and totally different with regard to its educational excellence. And I've said this for a long time, even when we were doing research for Free Winds Caribbean Food Security and Regional Development Initiative. We need to adopt the Indian education model in the Caribbean. And the reason I say that is this: having been to India, to Mumbai, Goa, Chennai, and other cities, everywhere that I went, I saw the differences in their education for young people, and the actual concentration, the focused concentration on skill development.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
if you, and also having traveled to the Far East, Japan, South Korea, and Thailand, Malaysia. I visited these countries under the Freeways Caribbean Food Security and Regional Development Initiative research program, as a means of looking at the not only the financial but the economic linkages that could be established for the Caribbean region, and that governed a lot of how we approach certain projects in our development stage. Now, what countries are concentrated and focused on skill development of our young people? China, Malaysia, South Korea, Japan, Vietnam. All of these countries concentrate on skill development. Here in the West, the first thing we want to do is put a tablet in front of a child and let them watch fairy stories and kids and Looney Tunes. What do we get? Idiots. No.
And the whole, also the whole influence of the North American Black culture on our culture.
Yes.
What
Yeah.
has happened is that they are not showing educated African Americans and middle class African Americans, those, like the W. Du Bois and so forth. They're showing us the basketball, and nothing is wrong with basketball, don't get me wrong. But I think that they are showing the illusion that, our freedom is going to come through, monetary freedom, economic freedom is going to come through playing basketball or football or whatever
No.
sports we're going to go after.
No.
When that is okay in its own fair sphere. But
Yes.
what we are placing too much attention on is entertainment and the dumbed down understanding of who a Black person is. And we're not much better now than the African American culture. When I see what I see in the Caribbean now, which used to be distinct years ago, I see no difference between us and a
Yeah. Well,
very watered down African
just
American.
as a very as another very salient point here is that in I'm not sure of the exact year. I know it was in the 1800s. Black educated Barbadians, okay, Barbadians who were born in Barbados
Mm-hmm.
from enslaved Africans,
Mm-hmm.
were born in Barbados, were educated at Harrison
Mm-hmm.
College, and
Yes.
they were then sent to the United States of America, and
Mm-hmm.
they founded the city of Charleston, South
Yes.
Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
The entire southern United States economic model was built by Black
By the
Barbadians.
Barbadians. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We have the obligation to honor
Mm-hmm.
that contribution to global society.
Yes.
But yet,
Yes.
we prefer to sit in our hands and say, oh, I need reparations. I need this. I need that. Nonsense. We have an obligation to our heritage. We need to educate our people. We need to educate our people to do the right thing and to be able to build a skill set for a prosperous Caribbean that honors our ancestors and what they built for global prosperity.
Correct.
That is the bottom line.
Correct. And if ever we ever get reparations, which would be good too, it could help us, but it should be that it will be building schools and hospitals and other things, and also to help us to manufacture, to build manufacturing capacities so that we can grow. But our leaders just want reparations to do whatever they think is in their interest and not in the interest of the people.
Well,
And
what
that
we've
is the difference
seen,
we should say.
we see what happens with public funds already. What do you think is going to happen with a 4 trillion reparations check if it was ever
Correct.
written? Okay,
Correct.
there would be several political millionaires overnight. Somebody would have a
Yes.
private jet, a Mercedes Benz, a big car in Monaco, or a big house in Monaco, and the people would still be in the same position as they are now. Okay,
Yes.
reparations will never happen. Get
Yes.
used to it. Okay,
Yes.
and I don't care
And if
if
it,
anybody attacked me for being a white person saying that, but at the end of the day, the Caribbean is my home. And I am
mhm,
more concerned with building a prosperous Caribbean on reality terms rather than
mhm.
sitting on my hands waiting for something that may never turn up. Okay,
Yes.
and our
And
populations, our
yes.
young youth, our Black young youth across the Caribbean region are a precious resource. And the
It
longer
is.
we go on ignoring the situation, we are the ones that are going to suffer.
Yeah.
because they are our future leaders. So if we
Correct.
sit down waiting on reparations and say, oh, well, when we get this big check, man, we can do all of this and so on. Nonsense.
It's not going to
Get up,
happen.
get
Yes.
moving, get the programs in place, and kick the people who don't want to listen out of office.
Correct. Correct. That is what we need to pay our attention on, our corrupt officials, and look at their policies and what they're doing. Because as far as we're concerned, they may get reparations, but not in the way that we think is reparations is for reparations. And I'm very, very much, I must say, Mr. Corbyn, I'm very disappointed with, Dr. Beckles, who is a very brilliant, brilliant man. And the fact that he's pushing this agenda, which he knows that is just as an illusion. It's not true. It's not going to happen, and not going to happen in the way that we think it's going to happen. Go ahead, Mr. Corbyn.
You mean our resident armchair Pan-Africanists?
Yeah, I'm very disappointed. He's a brilliant man. Don't get me wrong. I love to listen to him, and he has a wealth of knowledge, the history seconds to none. But I'm not sure why he's aligned himself with this sort of phony agenda of reparations. I just don't know.
As I've said repeatedly, look, these reparation agendas and these Pan-Africanists and so on always prove to me that they've never visited the African continent. Okay, if these Pan-Africanists, well, I'm talking about living there. Okay, if these Pan-Africanists had spent time traveling across Africa and understood the ideologies and understood the systems integration of socio-domestic policy and so on with regard to tribal nuances and so on, and see where we have actually come from. Okay, go to Mali, and look at the archaeological ruins of the oldest university in Timbuktu, which educated the Persians.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The Persians gave us algebra. The Africans had it before them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The Persians gave us the English language via the Babylonian Empire. Okay. Then into India. Where were all of these people educated? The world's oldest university in Mali, in Timbuktu. That was the first university of the world. Because Africa is a rising continent. And we have an obligation, because our region's ancestry is rooted in the African continent. We have a righteous obligation across the region to ensure that our populations are educated to a standard that bring us honor to our ancestry. Okay, my ancestry is from Ireland. Okay, you read the book To Hell or Barbados. Okay, which details the ethnic cleansing of Ireland. The number of white prisoners of war coming into the Caribbean outnumbered Africans 10 to 1. But we didn't survive because we couldn't survive in this environment. Yes. Our African ancestry is thus far more important, and we need to focus on our African ancestry for a righteous obligation of honoring our ancestry with regard to creating the prosperity model that references and reflects the prosperity that the Caribbean and Africa hold together. If we don't do that, what will happen is that the North American technate will imprison all of us. That's the bottom line.
I think that Marcus Garvey's vision years ago was that Caribbean people, as you're saying, and even people in America, Black Americans, would have educated themselves and would have gone back to Africa, as you're suggesting, to help with the level of expertise and whatever that we've gleaned here. Because let's not be stupid and think that everything Western is stupid and everything Western is inferior, because that's not true, right? And we've learned some skills here, and that we could have taken them back to Africa to enhance Africa so that they could build. Just like America went to Europe and they helped the Europeans after World War II to rebuild, then we could have rebuilt Africa. But now we're finding our education system suggesting to us that everything Western is bad and we should reject everything Western, as if we are not a part, as if we did not help to form Western culture in this new world. So we are moving away from a sort of reality to an illusion, and we're sitting down with our hands folded that Africa will now come to help us, will now come to free us, and that is not going to happen too.
That's going to happen. No, the
That is
most
not-
important, a very important point here. I don't want people to think that we should be responsible for trying to rebuild Africa. We don't. Africa
Well,
does not need our help. Africa doesn't
contribute.
need our help. The
Yeah,
the
contribute.
most important contribution that we can do to honor our ancestry is to be able to create an environment for African investment. And everybody says, "Oh well, the African Exim Bank is coming to Barbados, and Mia Motley has done this and that, and so on and so forth." That is a notional illusion.
Mhm.
And the reason I say that is this: the entire illusion that is being put forward with regard to what the Barbados government is trying to fool the Caribbean into believing about Africa is
Mhm.
false. What
Yes.
is going to work? What is
Yes.
going to work, and what we have proven to work, is that
Yes.
in sitting down and speaking to African diplomats as well as heads of businesses in Africa, the only
I
thing
give
they
you.
want to see, the only
Yes.
thing that they want to see from the Caribbean is an acceptance of trade relations. And you say,
Yes.
well, that's why the Afro Exim Bank was put in place, and so on and so forth. The African Exim Bank does nothing for the people of Africa or the Caribbean,
Correct.
because we
Correct.
can't supply Africa with anything. And there's nothing in the Caribbean that Africa wants to invest in, simply because we are too small.
Hmm.
Barbados is the size of a single African village.
Right. Right.
Okay? Now,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, the reason that African business leaders want to be able to understand more about the Caribbean region is that they want to be able to see how they can assist in building cooperation of trade
Hmm.
as well as operational excellence, okay, across the Caribbean region, simply
Hmm.
because the only the only thing standing in the way of that is, guess what? A divided financial system across the Caribbean region. And the
Yeah.
first thing out of every single one of the African investors we spoke to, I'm not saying we spoke to everybody. We spoke to
Right.
a few people that were well placed in African investment. We spoke to two very wealthy investors in Angola. We spoke to an investor in Cameroon, Ghana. Um, uh,
Nigeria.
no, we didn't go to Nigeria. Nigeria is a con artist scam. We went to
Kenya. Kenya.
Senegal,
Okay. Oh,
Senegal,
mhm. Mhm.
and and um, and Guinea.
Mhm.
Okay, every single one of those asked the very important question, and most of their financial team asked us the question: what is the currency of the Caribbean? That one question tells you everything. They think that the
We
Caribbean
are all
runs on a
united.
single currency.
Hmm.
No, they don't.
Hmm.
And the minute
Hmm.
that you tell them, oh, well, the Barbados dollar is tied to the US dollar, and then there's the OECS 9 member nation, and the value of the Jamaica dollar is 135 to 1, they just go, okay,
Oh, we can't work with you.
story's done right there. As I am
We can't.
saying to you, as I've said on my podcast and I've said on my radio programs, the way for Caribbean and African prosperity to happen is a unified one Caribbean currency. Then the Caribbean becomes the fifth largest investment scenario or environment in the Western Hemisphere. That is when you will get Africa cooperation. Until then, everything that the Prime Minister of Barbados and everybody else is running around, Pan Africanists and so on, about this notional um, dream of Africa doing this and we're going to Africa and so on, is a pipe dream.
Yeah,
Okay?
and they know
Wake
that,
up.
and they know that. They know that. They just want to get, they have nothing to offer to us. So the best they can do is to
Yeah.
fill us up with dishes of illusion. And it fills our stomach, and, it makes us not, protest and create a revolution, right? So they know what they're doing, and they know that it will never work. Now, Mr. Corbin, if you had to call it tonight, de-escalation or escalation, where do you think this is heading over the next days? This war in Iran and the at the Strait of Hormuz and what is going to happen. Do you think? Because Trump is. Let me just read you of what he's saying because he is just out of this world. I don't. I really wonder how he sleeps at night. That's President Trump. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said the nearly 900-foot cargo vessel, that's the TOUSK, whatever it's called, was intercepted by the Navy destroyer USS Spruance in the Gulf of Oman after ignoring warnings to stop. He said the ship was disabled and boarded, and that the U.S. Marines now have custody of the vessel. Iran has not publicly commented on the reported seizure. The incident deserves, or underscores rather, how fragile the ceasefire remains, with both sides accusing each other of violations and at odds when the peace talks resumes. The 2-week ceasefire is set to expire Wednesday, and talks stalled. Trump earlier accused Iran of firing on ships in the Strait of Hormuz, calling it a total violation of the ceasefire. And he's saying that he's going to blow up, as you're saying, the ports. And so where is this going? And do you think it's going to be escalating anytime soon?
It's going to escalate within the next 48 hours.
Yes.
And the reason I say that is this. I've just received an intelligence update via Telegram here that the United States of America has canceled the further negotiation talks with Iran. What does that tell you? Okay, so there's no longer any negotiation, simply because Iran has said we have to retaliate to what Iran has said this afternoon. The developments indicate that peace may not come soon to the region, and a weeks-long blockade of our marine traffic has driven global oil prices higher, and likewise might remain in place until a solution can be reached, either through talks or militarily. What are you going to do? There you go. Within 48 hours. I would expect that within the next 12 hours. But at the end of the day, as a result of that, oil prices have skyrocketed past $98 a barrel and climbing.
Yes. So what do you think is going to expect here in the Caribbean? Are you going to expect upheavals, protests? I don't know.
I don't. I think unfortunately, this energy crisis is playing into the hands of the political elite.
Mm-hmm.
The political elite are going to use this energy crisis to do exactly what they did during COVID, and that is make money off the people from it. I mean, we saw the parliamentarian, Mr. Vaz, in Parliament in Jamaica, talking about doing transportation, rationing, and so on and so forth, failing utterly to realize that it's going to affect his company, but his company is the one that's going to be allowed to transport, and others are not. Okay?
Right.
During COVID, we saw government officials engaging in massive profiteering and racketeering, selling vaccines on the black market and selling vaccines, illegal vaccines, to other countries and so on, using the private sector as pawns. Okay, we saw that happen right here in Barbados. Our prime minister was involved in that. So if the prime minister of Barbados can be involved in illegal racketeering, selling vaccines to other countries, what do you think is going to happen to gasoline and diesel?
Yeah.
What is the most, and I ask this question a lot. To people that I speak to. What is the number one commodity that is stolen across the Caribbean region? Gasoline and diesel.
Energy, yes, it is. Yes.
What accounts for more theft than anything else in the Caribbean region? Gasoline and diesel. That is the number one stolen commodity in the Caribbean region. People are always stealing fuel. So if we already have a penchant for stealing fuel, that tells you one thing. Number one, the price is too high. The availability is not there because the price is too high, and it is controlled by the elite.
Yes. Yeah, it's on the black market then.
There you go. Precisely. No. If you now have the elites themselves having total access to being able to control the price of energy and its availability, then you have a recipe for disaster of economic proportions, and you also have a disaster humanitarianly, because ambulances can't go to pick up people, hospitals can't run diesel generators, you have power shutting down, you end up like Cuba, okay? Where Cuba lost 71 intensive care patients because the generator on the hospital ran out of fuel. 71 patients in the ICU died in Cuba.
Wow.
Okay?
Wow.
That is murder by economics. Okay?
It's
It's a
murder.
war.
And
It's a war crime. It's a war
it's
crime.
intentional, and it's intentional, and that is
Yes,
the whole point. It is
that is an
intentional.
economic war crime. Okay? Do you
Mm-hmm.
want that to
Mm-hmm.
happen across the Caribbean region and our little tiny islands? Do you
Mm-hmm.
want to see where you're told by the government, oh, you have to stay home because there's no fuel to run the buses? Well, you know what? I'm going to be using a new registration. Okay? My new registration here in Barbados, we have number plates that denote the parish. So M stands for St. Michael and S stands for St. James. Well, you know what? My new number plate is M2, my 2 feet. I can walk. I don't care. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just sorry for the people who have bought cars and on debt, and they're indebted, and they won't be able to drive them
Yeah, exactly.
and
But
still
the
have to
thing
pay
is,
their debt.
but don't forget, flooding the market with new cars or secondhand cars out of the Asian markets is also by design. The banks
It's
offer
racketeering.
100% financing. The banks offer
It's
100%
racketeering.
financing.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
It's
racketeering.
racketeering.
100% financing, and you can't get a
Right.
house. You can't go to the bank to
So
get a house. Yeah.
right. So now you're gonna find people moving out of their houses and living in the cars. That's what you're telling me.
Mm-hmm.
In
Mm-hmm.
addition to that, then the government steps in and says, "Oh, well, due to the energy crisis, you are not going to be allowed to drive your car, so you
Mm-hmm.
can't go to work. You have to work from home. But transportation is part of your business. So how are you going to pay the car loan? The car gets seized, and the bank nails you for payments every single month, and you still
Correct.
can't go anywhere." And then the government steps in and says, "Oh, well, because you drive a gasoline car, we're going to tax you higher because there's an energy crisis."
Yeah.
That's what we're facing. That is
Yes.
what
Yes.
that is what these criminal government enterprises are actually planning behind the scenes. This is
Mm-hmm.
actively being planned, and there's nobody that can't
Mm-hmm.
tell me that that's not happening because I
No,
have
and that,
inside knowledge that this is actually
yes.
happening.
Yes, and that is why Mr. Corbyn have been trying to say, and I sometimes vary away from, spending a lot of the minutiae of the war, which is necessary. Don't get me wrong. I really, I like what you do in terms of telling us what is happening, but I want to see the agenda. What is the agenda? Because this is what we need to focus on, and the
Yeah.
agenda is that it, as you said, it is going to be used by our governments to exploit the
Well, the
ordinary.
agenda for the Caribbean is full compliance with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is
Mm-hmm,
control of the population in 15-minute cities where
mm-hmm,
if you
mm-hmm.
drive outside of a certain area or you go past a certain electronic barrier, your bank account will be seized, you will be fined
Yes.
accordingly, and you will not be able to buy food or buy gasoline or whatever it is, and so on. They will use the energy crisis to implement that because the vaccines didn't work because of people like me. Okay,
Right.
enemy of the state got up and ambushed the government at the town hall meeting and basically exposed them as the criminals they were. Okay, or they are. The same thing is going to happen. So what we need to do is that we need to just tell the governments of the Caribbean region, you implement an energy policy or energy crisis without trying to solve the problem of supply and demand, and we will take control ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing is, if energy is going to become a controlled commodity, then if the government is failing at it, then let the private sector do the work. The problem that we have is that government sets the price of hydrocarbons in each Caribbean country, but all of the companies are private sector owned. Not only that, but all of the gasoline supply companies in the Caribbean are owned by US hegemony.
Right. By
We
private sector interests. Right.
right.
And
We do not
that's
have indigenous companies in the Caribbean that are in a position to be able to supply energy. That is our problem. Here in Barbados, we actually had a refining capacity when Texaco put in a boutique refinery here at Needham's Point in the early 1960s.
hmm
Barbados was self-sufficient on fuel, self-sufficient on exporting fuel to some of the other Caribbean islands, diesel and gasoline accordingly. And then all of a sudden they decided to step in and shut it down. Barbados is
Wow.
sitting on 36 active oil wells.
Good.
All we have to
Let's go.
do All we
Mhm.
have to
Go
do is
ahead.
to put a floating refinery offshore and start refining our own fuel again.
Yeah, let's look at some of the a few of these comments. They're trapped, priceless analysis, and on point. I'm not sure what he's saying there. The Iranians agreed to talk because of their diplomatic maturity, but said they held no great expectations because the U.S. uses talks for decapitation strikes and ceasefires for strategic
Spot on. Spot on.
rearmament. Go ahead.
Spot
Yes,
on.
spot on. Yes, beautifully said. Yeah, I agree with that. US wants the GCC to fail so the world buys energy from the US.
Spot on.
Mhm. The question for the US is whether fracking rather, can sustain world demand.
No, it's not. Fracking is not going to sustain world demand. However, if
Mhm.
Trump seizes Canada, you have the Alberta oil fields, which will
Mhm.
contribute another 46% to the oil capacity refining for North America.
Mhm. Mhm. Guyana has fuel shortage. What's up with that?
It had a fuel shortage. That was only for Tuesday last week.
It doesn't seem like it's solved though. According to the papers, that was just
Yeah,
a bit
because
of a
what that's by design. Again, that's by design.
Mhm.
Okay. At the end of the day, Guyana has failed to put enough fuel storage capacity in place. Okay.
Mhm.
Again,
Correct.
it comes back to our original point.
Refineries, yeah.
Guyana is not refining, but yet at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, they have failed to put enough storage in place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
if I was a small country like Guyana and I found myself in a position where I needed to increase my storage, the first thing I would do and the quickest way to accomplish storage capacity is to buy two oil tankers, fill one with gasoline and fill one with diesel. 5 million barrels of diesel in one and 5 million barrels of gasoline in the other, and park them in the Essequibo estuary and connect it to shore. Okay, right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When one runs out, you go and fill it and bring it back. It's not
Mm-hmm.
rocket science. Okay, but again, you have political interests at heart that do not care about doing common sense practical applications.
Mm-hmm. 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 Because it will be too what it's not guaranteeing them any profit, obscene profit, and that's
Not only
exactly what.
that, not only that, okay, but the old Trinidad adage applies. Okay,
Yes.
you know
Yes.
the United States of America designed a machine to catch thieves. Okay,
Oh.
so they started it up. They sent the machine down to Florida, and in the first day it caught 35 thieves for stealing.
Mm.
Okay,
Yes.
so then they put the machine in Jamaica, and it caught 16 people for stealing. And they carried the machine to Trinidad, and somebody thieved the machine. Okay.
Never heard
so,
that one. That's
so
interesting.
at the end, at the end of the day, if you put the opportunity at hand, what did I say just now? What is the most stolen commodity in the region?
Yeah.
Gasoline and
That's it.
diesel. The
Right.
government of Guyana has failed to put the storage capacity in place. If you
Yeah.
put the proper secure capacity in place, and the easiest way to do it is through two tankers moored offshore, try stealing from that. It's not possible. You can't
Mm-hmm.
steal fuel out of an oil tanker because it's
Mm-hmm.
offshore. How are you getting the fuel to shore? Okay. It's the
Mm-hmm.
easiest and simplest way to connect to shore. Then you have just small what we call above ground supply tanks. The
Mm-hmm.
tanker keeps those tanks on shore full, and the distribution trucks go from those tanks to the gas stations. It's not
Yes.
rocket science.
Science.
It can be
Yeah.
done quite easily. Barbados is in exactly the same position. If you were to park a 5 million barrel oil tanker in Carlisle Bay and connect it to the manifold that still exists there, then you can have fuel coming ashore. You
Mm-hmm.
also have a manifold in Freshwater Bay where LNG is piped ashore. You can add to that manifold and bring gasoline and diesel ashore. Okay, that's how it's done now. So what's the
Yes.
point? What's the problem? We have storage capacity in Barbados. Okay, we have enough storage capacity for aviation fuel. We have an aviation fuel manifold in Oistins Bay. We have one in Carlisle Bay, and we have an oil manifold in Carlisle Bay, and we also have a fuel manifold in Freshwater Bay. So we
Mm-hmm.
have the infrastructure. Are we going to build more storage capacity? That is our question for Barbados.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because we
Mm-hmm.
are going to have to do it. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we're going to have to park an oil tanker offshore. Okay, fill it full of half gasoline, half diesel. Okay, or two ships, and work
Mm-hmm.
from that.
Mm-hmm.
The most important thing for all Caribbean countries to recognize right now, if there's going to be an energy shortage, what is the short term mitigation that can be put in place with the least expense? And that is parking a vessel offshore that has fuel on board that can be piped to shore to take care of the shortfall in the short term. The strategic interest can then come by building onshore fuel tanks that can make sure that there's enough domestic capacity to meet the
Yes.
domestic demand. Once that
Yes.
is in place, after that, you don't have a problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I saw that there were lines at gas stations in Guyana where we talked about that. He's saying that it's sabotage. I think that was it too. Correct. Wants you to surrender your sovereignty. Iran will never. Like Guyana, Cuba refused. So
Yeah.
well, we're suggesting, Mr. Corbyn, that Cuba might yield to U.S. demands.
Well, I believe that Cuba will enter into a negotiated settlement. I don't think that Cuba is actually going to be found to be. But then again, knowing Trump, you know, that can flip flop from one situation to the other. Trump, there's no need to use military force in Cuba
In
because
Cuba.
the United States of America has a military base in Cuba already at Guantanamo Bay
Mm-hmm.
that can be reinforced and so on, and you can operate from that facility.
Mm-hmm.
A negotiated settlement is in the best interest of Cuba right now, simply because of its close proximity to the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
The United States of America does not need to use military action, but a negotiated settlement where Russia, Iran, and the United States can come to an agreement
Yeah.
where the United States of America can potentially administrate Cuba to a degree without interfering with Russian and Chinese interests and Belt and Road Initiative and the Russian um, sustainment of economic development and so on. At the end of the day, it actually benefits the US to have China and Russia in Cuba. And the reason for that is this, is that with the economic agreements that have been already put in place with the Cuban government and Russia and China, the United States of America doesn't have to spend a single cent for the enhancement of the infrastructure of that country. So if somebody came to you and said, I like your apartment building, you have 60 units, but it's a little bit run down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me repair it for you and we will share the profits together. What would you do?
Yeah.
Would you bomb the building so that he wouldn't have any access to it? Or would you say, sure, man, let's do it. I'll paint
Yeah.
the outside when you're finished and so on, and we can share the profits and the rent and so on. That is the negotiated settlement. That is common sense. That is
Mm-hmm.
practicality in the best interest of the tenants. Because let's
Yes.
face facts, the Cuban people are now tenants. They no longer have any sovereignty. They're tenants, just like how people in Barbados are tenants. We no longer
Yeah.
have any
Jamaica,
sovereignty.
all of us are tenants.
All of
Yeah, you're
us are
correct.
tenants. Okay,
Yeah.
but a negotiated settlement is in the best interest of Cuba and the Caribbean. Now,
Mm-hmm.
let us look at the situation that could cause military action in Cuba. What could cause military action in Cuba is if you have the revolutionaries within Cuba that decide to take military action of themselves against Guantanamo Bay.
Mm-hmm.
If you have revolutionaries in Cuba that decide to attack Guantanamo Bay because they don't like what America is doing to Cuba, then you would have a scenario that could possibly be a situation. Okay, that is far from reality, simply because the Cuban people are no longer that way minded as they were in 1953 when Fidel Castro took power. Okay,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so it would have to be something like a false flag event then. In other words, propagated by the CIA or something like that. And if the CIA is well known for going into Cuba and carrying out false flags, Barbados was the recipient of one of them when they blew up the Cubana flight in
Mm-hmm. You feel about it.
1976. Okay,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so the
Mm-hmm.
U.S. has a storied history of false flag events in the Caribbean based on Cuban sanctions and so on. Now,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, a negotiated settlement actually proves to the world that Cuba is taking the high ground with regard to the interests of Caribbean and global geopolitical interests.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if it does not decide to come to the table and says, we're just going to stonewall you and shut the door in your face, that will influence more likely a military objective rather than a negotiated settlement.
Mm-hmm. Trump is it? Yeah, Trump wants Iran to blow up everybody else's stuff so they can claim clean hands.
Well, at the end of the day, the question was asked. Um, the question was asked, how is it that Israel can level Gaza in 2 years, and is now leveling Iran? I mean, now leveling Lebanon, but yet Iran has been at it for 40 days and hasn't leveled Israel. Well,
Mm-hmm.
let's look at sheer volume of fire of explosives. The Israeli military leveled Gaza by dropping an average of 100 tons of explosives on Gaza per day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Iran launched waves of missiles that targeted Israel at specific nodes of command and control and economic interests. And
Mm-hmm.
every single salvo that came in from Iran only consisted of 10 to 16 missiles. Okay? It wasn't anywhere near 100 tons of explosive, but it did the most damage to Israel's society because it took out military communications, military command, civilian infrastructure that was being used by military command with underground facilities, as well as strategic points of interest that paralyzed the ability for Israel to operate at the level it was before.
Mm-hmm.
Further to that, we saw that the opening shots of the war, where Iran took out every single one of the major radar stations across the region. In other words, it rendered Israel and the US blind.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They had to
Mm-hmm.
rely on satellite communications rather than radar in order to be able to carry out what they did. And then they still had no ability, or still have no ability, to overfly Iran safely. They do not have air superiority. Every single time they have overflown Iran territory, they have been shot down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So the standoff strikes have been ongoing, and we will see that continue within the next 48 hours. I am guaranteeing you that.
Yeah, Iran can't trust Syria. I hope they do not fall into that trap.
I agree.
Um,
I agree
mhm,
100%, because that guy who was put in place by British MI6, taken out of
mhm,
prison in Syria and then installed as president, I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. Okay,
mhm. No, I agree 100%. This net will cause the Caribbean to become one big plantation.
a bigger plantation, a bigger
Mhm,
plantation. We're already on the
mhm.
plantation, brother.
Yeah, you're correct. Correct. 222 to 235 years of the United States existence was involved in some form of military conflict, roughly 90% of the time.
Yes, well, when you have a plantation, a Zionist plantation, that's what your calling is.
Mhm. But was it always Zionist? Was Zionism in for the
Well, since
235
United,
years in existence?
well, since 1871, the
Hmm.
Zionists took control of America in 1871.
Hmm.
That's when
Black
Washington
people,
D.C. became the corporation.
hmm Black people and other non-Zionists are alike. Is that what you're saying? Alike? We're in trouble, buddy. Yeah.
What he's saying there is that black people and other non-Zionists are Amalek.
Oh,
That's
Amalek.
not
Oh, the Amalek. The Amalek. Right. The Amalek. I got you. I got you.
that
Not the
is that
Amalek.
that is that is not true.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The only people who are Amalek are the Zionists. Zionists, and I'll
Hmm.
tell you the reason why I say that. And I don't want to get into any argument with regard to our black brothers and sisters, okay? Because
Right.
my ancestry is also black and white mixed, okay?
Hmm.
My
Hmm.
great grandmother was a black lady from St. George, okay? So
Yeah.
don't let's get into any argument about who is white or black, okay? We're not going
Right.
down that road.
Right.
Now, the most important thing about Zionism is that you have to understand its biblical origins. The biblical origins of Zionism are from the tribe of Amalek. Okay? Scripture teaches us that the tribe of Amalek, you shall have war with Amalek from generation to generation. When Joshua defeated the Amalekites by by collapsing the walls of Jericho, that was the first Amalekite Canaanite war. The Amalekites were then pursued by Joshua into the what is known as now Central Asia. Okay, the Amalekites then morphed into the Mongol Empire. Okay, and then into settled in central Kazakhstan and became the Khazarian Mafia. Okay, the Khazarian Mafia and the Jewish Ashkenazi Chabad Jews are who are running the world today. That was where Zionists came from. They are the ancient Amalekites, okay? A scriptural, biblical, warring tribe. The only thing they know is death and destruction. That is Zionism. To tell the world that black people are Zionists is nothing short of nonsense, okay? So dispel that notion immediately, okay? What we have to understand is that our black heritage comes from our African ancestry. Okay, the kings and the queens of Africa were the birthplace of civilization. So get that through your head right now. Okay,
Okay, then you got to deal with the militia if whatever does sideways. Um, uh, Go ahead. You were saying something.
no, no,
Somebody saying Nigeria, Guyana, Nigeria, and Russia have the world's best oil. Is that true?
no, that's not true.
I don't think it's true.
Russia and Iraq and Kuwait. Well, Kuwait was part of Iraq.
Hmm.
It was
Hmm.
the only
Was
reason
the
that Kuwait
partition?
was
Hmm.
separated from Iraq was because of
Hmm.
British hegemonic rule who drew the lines in the sand. But Kuwait has
Yeah,
always been part of Iraq. Iraq and Kuwait share the same Rumelia oil field. That's what the whole war in 1991 was over. Okay, and Russia and Iraq are actually the world's producer of the finest crude, known as paraffinic crude. Paraffinic
yeah.
crude looks like castor oil. It's very
Hmm.
clear. It looks like engine oil. It looks
Hmm.
like refined engine oil. Naphthenic crude is the black stuff that you get out of the ground in Saudi Arabia and here in the Caribbean and Venezuela and so on. That is naphthenic crude. It is very
Hmm.
high in a chemical known as naphtha.
Hmm.
Naphthenic crude, heavy crude oil. Paraffinic crude can be found in the desert in Iraq, settling like water in a pond.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
been
Hmm.
there, seen it. Okay, with my
Yes,
own eyes.
yes, yes, yes. Thanks for highlighting our University of Guyana. Proud to be Guyanese, of
Yeah,
course.
boy.
Yes. And Corbin is brilliant. That is by the same James that is bigging you up for highlighting his University of Guyana. And thank you for joining to James. Both can be true at the same time. Reparations wouldn't cancel what you described. Go ahead.
Well, let us look at it objectively. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
let us look at it objectively. Let us also look at it hypothetically, because
Mm-hmm.
we at this particular juncture in world geopolitics and economics, there is no immediate confirmation that reparations would ever be paid. So let us look at it objectively as well as hypothetically.
Mm-hmm.
Let us begin, first of all, by looking at it objectively. What goals for the Caribbean region, and we're asking this question objectively,
Yes.
what goals for the Caribbean region would be achieved if Barbados, one country,
Mm-hmm.
which has been highlighted by a recent University of the West Indies conference. University of the
Yes.
West Indies held a conference recently with regard to reparations, and Barbados was highlighted as
The leader.
allegedly
Yeah.
supposed to receive about $4 trillion in reparations. Objectively, for
Barbados
Barbados,
alone. Barbados
yes,
alone.
Barbados
Wow.
alone. Okay,
Wow.
Barbados alone was is according to the educated individuals from the University of the West Indies,
Yes. Yes.
and I say that facetiously. The most
Yes.
important thing is that let us look at it objectively for Barbados.
Mm-hmm.
Just now, when you have reparations being agreed upon,
Mm-hmm.
you would have to engage, well, right, any righteously minded prime minister,
Mm-hmm.
and I say that tongue in cheek, any
Yes.
righteously minded prime minister would sit down with a cabinet and they would form a joint select committee to ensure that any reparations that were paid into the country should be allocated to every single economic sector for development processes over a 15-year period. In other
Mm-hmm.
words, we're not going to take a check of $4 trillion into the economy at one single time. What we
Mm-hmm.
will do, a joint select committee would establish a escrow account in the World Bank
Mm-hmm.
where that money and reparations would be paid into the World Bank. and allocated through the Joint Select Committee, made
Mm-hmm.
up of the private sector, the
Mm-hmm.
public sector,
Yes.
economics, economic experts, as well as geopolitical experts, with regard to the allocation of the funds for the prosperity of the population in so doing of its application for each specific target.
Mm-hmm.
That way, you can guarantee that number one, corruption is shown the door and greedy politicians don't get their sticky little fingers on the money that should be for the people.
Right.
And what you do is that you now have a paper trail and a integrity track record of precisely how you're using that money to the benefit of your country, which you have alleged has been disadvantaged by the colonial imperialists. So
Correct.
if you take the money and you run away with it and it all disappears down somebody else's back pocket, you only reinforce the point in the imperialist mind that we should never have paid you in the first place.
Correct.
Do it
Correct.
right or get
Right.
out of town. Simple.
Right. No, no, you're right. You're right. And we're not opposed to reparations on this program. In
Of course
fact,
not.
we know that the Jews have been, have gotten received their reparations.
They made it for
So
themselves. The Jews pay
yeah,
the Jews. Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah. Yeah. The Jews pay the Jews. Yeah.
Well, but the fact of the matter, we understand that, when the colonial masters left the Caribbean, that our leaders replaced them. So whatever they're doing, they are only doing in the interest of the former colonial masters. I give you an example. When they tell us that we're getting aid in the Caribbean, we don't get the aid. The IMF doesn't really send, billions of dollars to the Caribbean. It's always going back into their coffers. They set up in such a way that the money goes exactly back to build them up economically and not to build us up. So that's exactly what the reparations will be doing. If we're getting $36 trillion, it will be going right back into the coffers of these colonial masters. And that's what we
Exactly.
have to
And so
do,
that is why I said to you, the Joint Select Committee being set up by a righteously minded cross section of industry, private sector, government, public and private, and so on, public, puts the integrity on the line with regard
Mm-hmm.
to how each economic sector of the country is going to be developed over a 15-year period. And
Yes.
the caveat must be added to that, that
Yes.
in the event of a change of government in the country, that money cannot be interdicted in the best interest of either political gain, campaigning, personal gain,
Mm-hmm.
or any other so doing with regard to the promotion of a political
Yes.
agenda.
Yes.
Okay, and
Yes.
then you get the high level legal experts in place and tie it to a legal framework that is honored by the legal systems around the world. That
Mm-hmm.
way, if we do it that way, it sets the stage for the righteous application of reparations to other countries around the world, because Barbados or whatever Caribbean country does it can now be used as the precedent and the benchmark for righteous application of reparations, thus reinforcing that
Mm-hmm.
reparations are definitely a good thing to happen. But right
Mm-hmm.
now, we only have a flock of idiots that are standing up talking a bunch of nonsense about a subject they know very little about. Okay, and as
Mm-hmm.
far as I am concerned, that is Polly clapping for Polly. Okay, I'm sorry, not happening.
I think that Beckles is very knowledgeable. I would not say that. I think he's extremely knowledgeable on the subject. I mean, I give him A plus plus plus. But the approach is what I'm concerned about, and the
Well, that's
fact that
exactly what I just said. The
correct,
approach is
the
wrong.
approach,
Polly
yeah, is
clapping for
wrong.
Polly. I'm sorry.
Yes, absolutely. That is the conversation. He said reparations should be pursued along with our development. I disagree with Fred, but I think he has answered your question. Beckles is a box, and pray for you. Know what? Yes. I don't get me wrong. I like the man, and I really like his teaching, second to none. I like to sit and listen. I would listen to Beckles for hours, but as I'm saying, I disagree on the approach. Teach them, Brother Corbin. And we have Irish people are amazing, just like Annie's did my research.
Well, I know.
Um,
Just jumping in on that comment.
yes, yes.
Just jumping in on that comment.
Yes.
Irish are amazing, and so are
Okay, let me go
Guyanese.
back. Let me go back to it. Let me go back to yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So Irish people are amazing, just like Guyanese. Did my research.
Hmm.
What a lot of people don't know is Irish Irish indentured servants
Yes.
actually were were used by the Dutch
Hmm.
to build Guyana, Georgetown,
Wow.
into one of the most beautiful, attractive cities in the Western Hemisphere before it was ceded to the British.
Hmm.
If you see old paintings of Georgetown, and one of
Yes.
the places, one of the locations in Georgetown where you can see some of these paintings of old Georgetown, which under Dutch rule,
Yeah.
is in the Georgetown Club on
Yes.
Camp Street in Georgetown.
Hmm.
Okay, Georgetown was one of the most beautiful cities created in the Western Hemisphere. All of the
Yes.
little canals were maintained. You had hanging gardens, you had beautiful wooden buildings and everything. The British took it over and it went to hell in a handbasket. Why? But guess what? The Irish labor force that put it in place was signature to creating some of the artworks and the architecture that you have in Georgetown right now. Okay? So
Mm,
yes, the
mm.
Irish and the Guyanese have a lot in common.
Yeah, and the Guyana, and one of these days we can talk about that. Guyana and Barbados have a long tradition of
Yes.
going
Yes,
back
we
and
do.
forth, right?
Yes, we
Yeah.
do.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Remember,
Yeah.
in the days of the Federation, Guyana was trading with Barbados, with vessels sailing between Barbados and Georgetown
Hmm.
3 times a week.
Yes.
Passengers.
Yes.
My grandfather used to travel to Guyana regularly.
Hmm.
Okay, when
Hmm.
he, in his younger days before he actually moved to St. Vincent, he used to go down to Guyana regularly.
Hmm.
So Guyana and Barbados have a storied history of trade that has been ongoing.
Yes, I think we have with that with this already. Simon Show was saying that Iran has the best oil, but I think you have addressed that question before. Mia is already complaining there are too many cars in Barbados, so you may have a point.
Yes, of course I have a point, simply because I
Mhm.
understand the agenda that's on her portfolio. Her
Right.
portfolio is to empower the banks to 100% financing and then make money off of it, selling fuel. Okay, and we have to understand, the more cars that are on the island means more money flowing into government coffers from the fuel
The
pump. Because
bags.
remember, the
Hmm.
government of Barbados did away with the licensing authority road tax and decided to
Hmm.
tax at the pump. The more
Hmm.
cars you put on the road puts more money in government coffers, because you have to
Hmm.
fill those cars up with gasoline. Right now, the
Hmm.
government of Barbados is making $58 million a month on average from fuel
Hmm.
sales alone. That's
Hmm.
just from that
Hmm.
fuel tax. Okay, 58 million a month. Multiply that by 12. So why are we 16 billion US dollars in debt?
And do you have the gridlock that you see in Kingston? With
No, no, we
with
don't
all
have
the
it.
number of cars,
Well, we
you don't
have
have the grid.
we have gridlock for about 2.5 hours in each direction, morning and afternoon. After that,
Hmm.
the only reason that's happening in Barbados right now is because we're undergoing some major roadworks across the island, and several
Okay,
roads are being refinished.
that
So
is good.
everybody wants to drive on the smooth road, and
Right.
the outlying roads are in bad condition. So if you
Hmm.
get everybody trying to fit on the same road, it's only obvious you're going to have congestion. Okay,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
it's it's not rocket science.
Yes.
Barbados needs a second industrial highway. Okay, and my company has already designed that for Barbados, a second industrial highway with 6 brand new industrial parks designed along it. Okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
the roadway that my company has designed as part of the Free Winds Caribbean Food Security and Regional Development Initiative. This design was done in 2014.
Hmm.
Is to create a second industrial highway that runs across the island with 6 industrial parks. But how do we pay for that road to be built? Well, the
Yes.
road actually pays for itself, because we've designed it as an intelligent infrastructure project. And that is, it generates its own electricity and it stores its own water. Okay. And it also generates water as well through solar remediation, as well as generating power in uh, solar, solar in hydrogen.
Hmm.
That road then pays for itself. We generate enough water for agriculture, we generate enough water for communities, and all of the water and electricity used in the 6 industrial parks comes from the road.
Yeah, but where's the capital coming from? You need the capital to build it.
Yes, the capital comes in simply because we at that particular point in time when it was designed, we had 6 private sector investment. Okay,
Hmm.
6 investors
Okay, good,
coming in
good.
to put up the capital for it, and then
Hmm.
the road pays for
For
itself.
itself, yes, I know. Once you have the capital,
Intelligent
then
infrastructure.
yes, yes, yes. And the Caribbean does not seem to have, well, the Anglo-speaking Caribbean, because in the Hispanic you do overhead, highways. We need to build more overhead bridges to be able to, some of these roads we can't, expand on them. So we need to build overhead roads, or
We have
highways.
to
What do you say?
understand. We have to understand that the road infrastructure, and I'm referencing Barbados particularly, the road
Hmm.
infrastructure in Barbados has been an expansion of the traditional um,
British,
wagon roads that were
right?
used during colonial
During,
eras. So
hmm.
the road that was once plied by horse and buggy and horse and cart became a paved road and so on, and then has been slowly expanded. And the only new additions to
Hmm.
Barbados's road infrastructure have been the roads that access housing developments and the ABC Highway. If
Hmm.
we sit down and we look at a road rehabilitation project for Barbados, it will cost us almost $100 million. Okay,
Wow.
so the key to getting past the gridlock is to put a second industrial highway in, which has 6 major industrial parks attached to it, which moves moves about 40% of the congestion
Traffic.
out
Hmm.
of the congested built up areas. And
Hmm.
one of the contributing factors to the congestion in Barbados is a lot of schools are still in their traditional locations. We
Hmm.
need to create school districts in the country.
Yes.
If
Yes.
you create
Yes.
school districts in the country, you can then
Yes.
diversify the University of the West Indies with separate learning centers in those school districts. So you don't
Hmm.
have to go down to Cave Hill to
Yes.
study a particular subject. You have a
Correct.
school district nearby, and you have a set of
Absolutely.
subjects, and you have a greater cross section of educated students coming out of that particular school district, and you can create a competition in the school districts, and education and the enhancement of the population escalates.
Visionary. That is vision. Because when you think about also in the rural parts of Barbados, as perhaps in Jamaica, that you don't have a university, except for the western, the western area in Jamaica, in Montego Bay, you don't have any, outshoots of the university in like St. Anne and other, west, what do you call it now, rural areas, rural parishes. Why don't we? Why is it that they just wanted these universities to be at Mona or at Cave Hill? It should be
It's
at other
colonial
places.
control. It's
Yeah,
colonial control.
yeah,
Okay, you have to
yeah.
understand that the colonial control model is you have a, I liken the colonial education model to the penitentiary system. You
Yes,
have a facility. It is a
yes,
gated facility. You have to be
yes,
there by a certain time. You have an agenda to accomplish by a certain time. Then you have a break, and then you have to be back on the agenda by a certain time, and then you were allowed to leave. Now,
yeah.
our schools are youth penitentiaries.
They are.
Youths
They
arrive at
are.
the gate. They're
Hmm.
scanned with body scanners for weapons. They're allowed into the penitentiary. None of them pay attention to the agenda. And then they're allowed for a little free time at lunch and so on, where they get into fights and scuffles all over the place. Then they're back into the penitentiary for another inattentive agenda. And then they're released home onto the streets where the scuffles and the fights continue. Is that
Yeah, and
progress?
as much as we like to curse the United States, yes, do you know how many students from Trinidad, from Barbados, and Jamaica, who were labeled as not very slow and they were not bright, and when they go to the U.S. and they're nurtured there, and they go to good universities and they do well, and they become their doctors, engineers, and lawyers, right? And when these teachers in the Caribbean see them, it's almost like their excuse is, oh, the United States system of education is easy, so that's how you become
Well,
engineer.
I can't discount that the education system in the United States is easy. Okay,
Yes. Yes.
it is too easy, and I'll tell you a
Yes.
little story. I've told this
Yes.
story before, but I'll
Yes.
tell it again simply because
Yeah. The subject.
we're on the subject of education.
Hmm. Yes.
I I went to the United States of America in 2005 to
Hmm.
do my aerospace engineering degree program at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical
Hmm.
University in Prescott, Arizona.
Hmm. A master's too, right? It was a master's,
So
right?
I'm still doing the masters right now. That's
Right. Okay.
unrelated. That's unrelated to
Okay.
Embry-Riddle.
Okay.
I got to Embry-Riddle, and one of the prerequisites for the aerospace engineering program was a English language and English literature examination.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we were brought into a classroom. The exam papers were put before us, and we had 60 minutes to accomplish both papers.
Right.
Well, in looking through the paper for the first 5 minutes, I realized, hang on a second, this is third grade English competency. So I said,
Yes.
okay, this is going to be very easy.
Yes.
So I took my time and I went through everything, did the short essay, did all of the did the entire papers, and handed in my papers. I handed in my papers at 58 minutes,
Hmm.
2 minutes before the time was up, when I left
Hmm.
the classroom.
Hmm.
On my leaving, the professor said to me, "We're going to reconvene here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for the
Hmm.
results." I said, "Okay, fine, no problem." Next morning at 10 a.m., the classroom filled up again with everybody, and the results were handed out. Everybody got their papers back with their score.
Hmm.
Everybody got their score on their paper except me. I was
Yes.
sitting alone in the classroom, like, okay,
What's going
somebody lost my
on?
papers or
Yes.
what?
Yeah.
What going on? What going there by?
Yeah.
So anyhow, so, so the professor looked at me. This is a lady. This is a lady. The lady
Hmm.
professor looked at me and said, "Oh, what's your name?" So I said, "My name's Fred Corbin."
Hmm.
She said, "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I should have told you that Mrs. Beatty in AC1 would like to see you, Academic Building 1." I
Right.
said, "You could have told me that at the beginning rather than me sitting here
Yeah.
for an hour, you know."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
I'm anxious.
I went upstairs to AC1, knocked on Miss Beatty's door, and she was like, you know, "Oh, hello. I'm very pleased to see you. Could you give me 10 minutes, please? I'll be back right away." So I said, all right. So I sat down. And eventually, she turned up and said, could you come with me? Let's go to the conference room. I was like, "Go to the conference room? Why?" "No, no, no, no. We have something to talk about." I go into
Hmm.
the conference room, and the entire faculty of the university was in the conference room.
Right.
So I'm kind of like at a loss. What's going on here now? Right? So the first question I asked Miss Beatty, I said, "Am I being interrogated about something? What's wrong?" She said, "No,
Hmm.
no, no. We just wanted everybody to meet you and so on. And wanted you we want to ask you a couple of questions." I said, "Have I done something wrong?" She
A
said, "No, no, no. On the
conference.
contrary.
Yes.
On the contrary, you haven't
Yes.
done anything wrong." So I said, "Okay, well, if I haven't done anything wrong, can you tell me why I'm here?" She said, "Well, it's I'll prefer to hand that over to the faculty members."
Right.
So the first faculty member asked me, "Where were you educated?" So I said, "Well, I was
Hmm.
educated in Barbados."
Hmm.
He said, "Barbados, what's that?" I said, "That's where I'm from." Okay.
And it was
I said, "You see that?"
2005.
I
And it
said,
was
"You see that? You see
2005.
that? You see that map on the far wall?" Okay.
Hmm.
I took the
Hmm.
laser pointer and pointed to a little dot on it and said, "That's Barbados."
Yeah.
Okay. So can you tell us about Barbados? I said, "Well, Barbados was a British colony. We now have a so-called independence,
Hmm.
but we, you know, we are the third oldest British Westminster Parliament in the
In
Western
the Western
Hemisphere.
Hemisphere. Hmm.
Our British Westminster Parliament was founded in 1637."
Hmm.
And one of the guys like, "I
Wait,
never
hey.
knew that."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, yeah, not everybody does, but technically speaking, we had a government 100 years before you even had thought about having a war with
Right.
Britain."
Right.
So anyway, I said, "So why am I here? I come from Barbados, I was educated in Barbados. So why am I here?" So the senior faculty member, who was actually the CEO of the university, he said, "We have a dilemma, and we would like to ask you if you would be willing to engage in a part-time education job teaching English language and English literature." I said, "Absolutely not. I came here to learn aerospace engineering, not teach English language." I said, "Well, why are you asking me that question?" She said, "Well, it's a bit of a problem that we have right now, because the examination that you just sat, you passed at 60% higher than the professor we hired to teach it.
Oh Lord, that was a scathing remark, that professor. Wow.
Actual facts. Actual
Yeah.
facts. Needless
Wow.
to
Wow.
say, that professor wasn't alone around much longer, because here it is, a little white boy from Barbados turns up and shows her up to be a dumbass. Okay, so
And,
anyway,
and and the question that
it,
they're asking you in 2005, where is Barbados,
yeah.
is sad. It's really sad, and it also speaks about them, the professors. They don't have to know much about
Well,
it,
there you go.
but to not know that Barbados is a island of the
Right.
Caribbean Sea. Well, in the Caribbean, I mean, I find to
No,
be,
but the thing is, to get back to our
yeah.
point with regard
Hmm.
to
Education,
the
the system of it, and
our
you said that
education
it's easy.
system,
Yeah, yeah.
in Barbados, particularly facing the economic crises that we do have coming down the pipeline. And trust me, it's
Hmm.
going to be here sooner than we think. If we are not prepared to take significant positive action with regard to educating our younger generations in a positive outlook with regard to everything that is happening around them, all of our younger generations are going to fall victim to artificial intelligence, which will only make them more ignorant and more uneducated than they are now. This is the
Yes.
greatest deception the world has ever faced, where
Hmm.
artificial intelligence is looked at as the go-to for to solve every problem. All it does is that it reinforces mental laziness. It does not
Yes.
teach you to think. It tells you what to say
To
and when to
think.
say it.
Yes.
Okay,
Hmm.
it does not teach
Hmm.
you critical thinking. Okay,
You're correct.
in addition to that, the attention span that is absolutely necessary for cognitive development has now been completely eradicated in
Hmm.
favor of taking
Hmm.
advice from something that does not know what it is doing. It
You're
is an
correct.
algorithm that has been put in place by other ignorant people. That's why it's called AI, American
Hmm.
ignorance.
Artificial.
Right.
Artificial. It's not real.
Artificial.
Yeah, artificial.
Okay.
Now, digital ID is coming to Trinidad, and it's coming to Jamaica also. But and I would
Yeah.
want you another time. Maybe we can't talk about it now, but I want you, because when we saw what Andrew Holder said last week about some of the people not being able to access hurricane relief assistance because they don't have banking, they're not banking online or digital IDs. It means therefore that he's serious. So we know
Well,
that digital,
well,
and could this, and the war, as a result of the war, Mr. Corbyn, do you think digital ID could be one of the benefits or
absolutely.
agendas of the war?
The
Yeah.
the energy crisis is going to come down to using a digital ID to
Hmm.
implement fuel rationing. In other words,
Yes.
you are not going to get gas for your car unless you can show me a digital ID.
Hmm. Hmm. No, you're correct.
We know that's going to be part of it. We know that's going
Hmm.
to be part of it. Okay.
Hmm.
As regards to fuel, to
Yes.
hurricane relief,
President Jafar. Hmm.
as regard to hurricane relief, Andrew
Hmm.
Holness actually knew beforehand that Jamaica was going to be destroyed by a hurricane. Okay. I
Yeah.
think I
I
sent
think
you
so.
what I wrote with
Yeah.
regard to it,
And
where
and you also did
he
that.
had
You did a show too. You did a show out with me, so you're on record of saying that.
right. And at the end
Yeah.
of the day, he knew that Jamaica was going to be destroyed by a hurricane. And the reason
Hmm.
he knew that was that he was told it was going to happen, even although, and he knew that he would only get hurricane relief if he paid allegiance to Israel. That's when he went to Israel and went to the wall and put his hand on the wall and wore the little soup bowl on his hat, on his head, and so on, and paid allegiance to Israel. Okay? Then Melissa struck Jamaica, and then the aid flowed in. And now he's telling people that if they don't have a digital ID, they can't get help. That
That's
is
what
a
he's saying.
criminal enterprise, lock,
Hmm.
stock, and
Hmm.
barrel.
Hmm.
Okay?
Hmm.
And I would
Hmm.
say to Mr. Holness, if he's viewing this video, you are a criminal racketeer, just like the Prime Minister of Barbados, okay,
Hmm.
who is using the exact same excuses to do the exact same things, where you are withholding critical aid to our people of the Caribbean based upon a false representation.
Hmm. Hmm. That's not good. I found it to be very, very bad. And we have to deal with it on our video. Is it Sol Gas and Rubies? You know that Mr.
Yeah, a few
Corbyn,
middlemen.
yeah, middleman in Barbados. Yeah. Yeah.
Andrew, I'm looking at the clock here. I've got to join
You
my
have to
class
go. Yes,
in
you have to go.
in
Yes,
10
but
minutes.
yes. Okay, so thank you so much for joining, and another time we'll invite you. Okay, another time. Okay.
Good night, everybody.
All a good night. Have a great one. Yes.
See you.
Yeah. See you. Okay. So let's continue with the comments that you have here. These Jews Zionists are the Khazarians. Okay. Yes, I think Mr. Corbin did say that. And the Khazars took over the Jewish religion. They actually worship Baal. Um, the no Iran has the best. Okay, so you're saying Iran has the best oil. Yeah, and those things are debatable. We won't debate these things on. Is that is it fair? Is oil is almost clear? Um, and okay, let's go on to there was a presentation on Iranian oil I did. Okay, well, and these things are debatable, so we're not going to debate who has the best oil, whatever. These things are a bit debatable according to different people. And I don't disbelieve you. People, these are subjective. It's just like saying chicken, whatever jerk chicken is best and whatever, these things are debated by people. All that could be done without the involvement of the World Bank and in against the private sector having any say in reparations payout. I'm sure they do. I'm sure that the private sector is involved in this reparations talk and that they will be benefiting because, as I'm suggesting to you, it has nothing to do with benefiting the victims of slavery. I don't think it does. I think it has to do with, how much money that they can accrue from this operation. Remember now that we have enough evidence here in the Caribbean to see that our governments are not working in our interest. So one of the things I find very sad about us is that we repeat the same things over and over and over again. All right, so today we have an IMF loan. We believe what the IMF says, and then it fails. And then tomorrow again, we get another IMF loan. It fails, and then it's over. The cycle repeats itself without us not really coming to any proper realization that they are not working in our interest. We have to now wake up. Yes, the World Bank is run by these colonial masters. Yes, it's not for us. It's not definitely to help us. That is a fact, said Richard. And despite my complexion, I have Irish in my family. My grandfather was a Dougling, and that is the Morgery family, or my relatives, typical Barbados. Yeah, I think most of us in the Caribbean, or some of us do have, even in spite of the fact that we might be dark-skinned, we do have remnants or other, European blood in us, in our DNA. So it might not be that strong, but it is there. And that's why we can't say that we are 100% black, okay? Because we are part, as a professor from Jamaica said, we are part Indian, we are part European, and part African, okay? We share all of that. And culturally too, not only DNA, but culturally, we can't say that we are 100% African, can we? Yup, facts, United States, dumb as rocks. We need to discuss this one of these days, because as a person who taught there and taught in the Caribbean, I think we have to be careful what we say too, because I used to say it when I went there, but when we look at the system of education in the Caribbean, how does it help us to develop, our economy, even engineering, even some little basic things in the Caribbean? We're not doing well in terms of in all practicality. So I would think that the United States system of education produces. And our education system, as much as it's elite centered, right, it does not in many cases teach us how to be practical. Because one, we sometimes lack the resources. I hear of doctors, for example, who go to the United States and they don't know how to use basic equipment because they didn't have these things in the Caribbean, right? So we have to be careful sometimes how we judge it, because it does produce, and it produces some very, world-class people. Right? The United States has produced some excellent, orators, writers, scientists, engineers. So the system of education is how it is done. And to us, it might be a little bit easier because we were put under lots of stress in our system. But to US people, it has its difficulties. And even to some of us too, one of the things I never liked about the United States education system, which I found a little bit hard, multiple choice. I never liked multiple choice. Every time I did the multiple choice exam, it's always not very good because it's the way how they structure their multiple choice, which can be challenging. Right, so they have there, but I agree. But I think the hard part comes with us because we're trying to weed out as many people out of the education system, and that is why we set our exams so difficult. And because we have to work harder, because there are fewer opportunities, then it appears that we are brighter, if you understand what I mean. Okay, but when you go to Great Britain too, they don't put a lot of stress on their students as we do in the Caribbean. Right, we put a lot of stress on our students in the Caribbean because we're weeding out the majority because we don't have enough opportunities here. So we have to say, well, you are not competent. You can't come to the University of the West Indies when you're a bright person, but they understand that they have limited spaces, so they have to accept a few. So they rather set exams very difficult so that they can weed out the many. All right, if you understand what I mean. Philly's saying, big up yourself. Yes, big up everybody. My brother took me out of New York and educated me in Barbados. Best decision of my life. And one of the things too about our education system, we have to give the Caribbean its credit, and credit where credit is due. We are structured. And that is what you're not going to get a lot in some cases in the United States, unless you're going to a very elite private school, right? We are structured, and when I look at, okay, we have our morning devotions, we have time to go to lunch, right? You have to give your teacher a certain level of neatness in your writing. I remember when I was in the States, for example, and I was doing a math course, and we'd get our homework to do, right? And the students would just scribble something down, and for homework, I would put my name on it, underline my name, and make sure everything is written neatly. And he would come to the class and he would say, look, this is how I want assignments to be done. Neat and tidy. And in some cases in America, students don't learn the structure. So we can learn a lot from. Another thing is that, we didn't grow up that we were Black, and because we were Black, we were substandard. Because we are mostly people of color in the Caribbean, we grew up thinking that we can produce high quality content, right? And that we're bright. So we compete with the Chinese, we competed with Indians, we competed with all people all over. So when we go to the States, we go there with that level of confidence, knowing who we are. And that's a very critical area in your development. When you get to university, you know exactly what you are about. Do you know how many times a typical North American changes their career when they go to university? In the Caribbean, you have to go to university knowing exactly what you're going to do or you're going to fail. Right? So we are forced to grow up very quickly. Think about it. At age 10, back in my days, I don't know what happens there now, but age 10, you had to know exactly that what, they're going to put you in the high school, or you're going to go to a whatever secondary school. So from that age, you're doing the common entrance, those exams that were difficult and decided your future. Right? It was these things really from very early. We had to grow up, we had to mature, and we had to be disciplined in everything we do. Right? Since you are from Barbados, are you familiar with Richard Drax, whose family, well, he's not here now, so also connected to the posh town of Drax Hall in St. Anne, a former slave plant. He's not here now, Phyllis, so when he comes back, we could ask him that question. Thanks. Somebody's saying thanks. Probably Mr. Corbin answered your question. By the way, Mr. Pereira is going to be here on Tuesday to talk about what is happening, what we're talking about here. I'm sure about the weeding out because since the beginning of the century, TNT have been sending all of its children into high school. Yeah, well, they have been sending them into high school. The same thing happening in Jamaica too, but it's not equal. Remember now that still the people who, even though they have these exams that they all do and they go into high school, but they still weed out the ones who get the high score still go to the elite schools. And I'm sure the same thing happens in Trinidad. Certain schools in Jamaica, for example, they're not going to take any student who gets under 90%. Right? They will never. So how is it equal when you have students who are going into high school that gets 90 and over and another school that only gets 50 and below? So even though they're called high school, but they're still not on equal footing, right? Because the one with the 90s is going to do better than the one with the 50 and below. We continue to choose poverty and colonization via the status quo. Breaking the cycle requires more than change in leadership. It requires a shift in economic model. Absolutely. And that is what they're not telling us. So in order now to shift away from economic discussions, Philly, they have to tell us about, reparations, and not that reparations could not be useful, because reparations, if it's connected to the right economic model, could help us, right? Because we need hospitals, we need schools, we need industries. So definitely, if we should get like $30 trillion from, from these colonial masters tomorrow, it would be good. But let's be practical now. Many of these same countries, like the United States, France, England, all of these countries that participated in slavery, they're also now falling. And even, members of their white, what they're also economically, they're now struggling. So do you think they're going to give us Black people all of this money to build us up now, when their own people, the descendants of their own people, are struggling to survive? Do you think that's going to happen? That's one of the things we also have to look at. We have to be practical, right? That they're not going to do that. It would be nice for them to do it, and for us to at least develop the Black race, but they're not going to do it over their own race and people. They're just not going to do it. So we cannot fool ourselves to think that, that is going to happen. It's not going to happen. I'm not sure about the weeding out. Well, okay. Well, they weed out in terms of you have all these high schools, as we're saying, but if the people who are going to the schools that are not as bright as the ones getting the 90s and the over, they're going to get into universities, right? So the majority of students who are going to go to university of what they call it in Trinidad, the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus, right? The majority of those who will get into St. Augustine campus in Trinidad and Tobago are the ones who are coming from elite schools, getting 90 and over. The majority of them getting 50, that went to schools getting 50 and under in their common entrance, their entrance exam to high school, will not be going. Yes, one or two will make it. One or two from that cohort might make it, but the majority are still coming from and when you go to the University of the West Indies, they do set exams very difficult that weed out a lot of students. When I was in the States, I had a student from the University of the West Indies, and she came to my office one day and she said to me, when I was in Trinidad, my professors, they didn't allow us to come inside their office and speak to them and have them ask questions and so forth. They wouldn't allow it, because they behave like gods, and they just think that we should just know it. We should just learn it, right? If you don't learn it, then you're done. What are you doing at university? You read for your degree, right? They're not there to help us as they do. And the universities in the United States are quite nurturing. You have to have office time with the students. You have to dialogue with them, and you have to help them as much as possible. In the Caribbean, they tell us that we're done. So if you're not getting it, you're done. And they are not afraid to mark an F beside your grade. When I was at Howard University teaching there, it was okay. If I were going to give, let us say, 10 of my students an F, they're going to call me in and say, how is it that you had a class and 10 students got an F? Something is wrong with your teaching. And even sometimes one, and they actually ask you, why did the student get an F? And even if the students deserve the F. So the point is that also has its disadvantage, because sometimes students are not responsible enough to know that they should, work hard. But the fact is, the point I'm raising here is that they nurture you more in America than they would in the Caribbean. And why is it that some of our students who we consider to be dunce, right, and not very intelligent, go there and they are at the top of their class? They produce. Right? They are writing lots of journal articles and they're doing well. Not only economically, but scholastically, they're doing well too. So something is wrong with our universities. Should we, at age 10, or a child who's at 15 years old, should we tell them that they can't be a doctor? When you were going to high school, for example, and if you're not doing well at chemistry when you're 13 or 14 and you want to become a doctor, they tell you that don't even go into that profession because, you can't manage chemistry. No, that is not good. Because what if when I mature and I understand how to study, and I see life from a different, perspective. That oh, I perhaps sorry about that. Let me see here. Instead of weeding out, why not improve the standards of the so-called lesser schools? Right. Often someone that is brighter than you at 11 and 12 doesn't mean that 14, 15 will be the same, or even 20. And even, or even 20, Philly. And that's what I'm saying, that most times 14 or 15, I must say now that Jamaica, I don't know about Trinidad, is trying to do a situation where they're not allowing the students to leave high school until they're 18. Because some of them were leaving high school at 15. And what are they? Sometimes they're not mature, 16. They're not yet they're not certain what they want to become. Right? And our system doesn't allow enough time for young people. I'm not saying now that they shouldn't, try to train them to be mature from a young age, but sometimes we place too much pressure on them and they don't know if they want to study medicine, or you can't tell them that they can't study medicine if that's what they want to be. Maybe it takes a longer journey than somebody who is brighter and shows more aptitude, but don't tell him or her that that person won't be able to become a doctor. And when they go to the States, they do well, and and when they go back to our countries, they're sometimes brighter than some of the ones that we think are so, bright and scholastic. Okay, so the system is different and is designed for different levels of competency. Ours is still rooted in colonialism, that's for sure, and slavery and supplantation, so it's just a different system. Now, what do you think? Any other question? What do you think about the war? Do you think that we are going to be, or you think we're ready for the oil prices, the rise in the cost of living? Do you think we're ready for that? Or should we be saving? What should we be doing? What are we doing? And those of you who have children, how are you going to survive, with the high cost of living that is going to be a result or consequence of the war? What is happening? What do you see happening? People have been writing on the videos that the cost of living in Guyana, in Trinidad, Dominica, Grenada, people have been writing and saying that they're seeing high prices in these things, in these places. I remember when I was in college, a friend from Trinidad and Tobago told me the teacher was complaining about her son giving trouble in the school, right? And she just did not want to bother with the child, right? And that is, it is sad. It is sad. I think that, let me just be clear here. I think in the United States and in the Caribbean, both systems, they are to the extreme. So you find where in the Caribbean, we tend to blame the students if they're not learning, right? And say, oh, it's the children and the teacher can't do anything to help them, right? They're dunce, right? And they should not be studying that subject or whatever. We don't try to nurture them. In the US, in some cases, they go to the extreme of blaming the teacher entirely and saying the reason why the student is not learning is because the teacher is not teaching well and the methods are not so effective, right? When it should be a balance. So I would call for a balanced approach in both places, in the Caribbean as well as in the United States, and I think then is when we can, but I must credit the United States that it gives students a bit more opportunity and nurtures them and does not give up. But again, it has more opportunities than the Caribbean. In the Caribbean, it's deliberate because they understand that they have to weed out. If they don't do that, then how many people are going to be professors? How many professors can teach at the University of the West Indies, right? So from the very first day, they are going to weed out. And don't get me wrong, even teachers, professors at the University of the West Indies too, look at what happens at University of the West Indies, Mona campus in Jamaica, St. Augustine campus in Trinidad and Tobago, and Barbados, the Cave campus. The professors I talk to there, and when I read the newspapers, they say that sometimes it's very political for them to be upgraded to a professor because of the politics there, and they don't want to have so many professors, so they make it very difficult for you to get to that level of a full professor, what you call a full professor in the United States. So from in all areas, the Caribbean is a plantation, right, where it tries to keep down the masses of people to accommodate the few. That is our system is, from the kindergarten right up to the level of university. It is dog eat dog. It's not meant to help people to grow and to compete on an objective level, right? Because they want a few. They're only ready for a few. Until we now, as Philly is saying, until we change our economics, right? And then we have our economics is more inclusive, then I think that it will never change. So from school days, we have been indoctrinated to say that, okay, the race is a swift race, and those who, is not like for those who endure, but those who have the money, those who have the competence, they're the only ones who will survive. One day she asked the child what happened, and the child said to her that all what they're teaching us in America, I already did all that in lower class in Trinidad. Yeah, it's true. It happens. It happens. But one of the things too we have to be careful, Annie, is that if you go to a good school in the United States, a private school, you can be challenged, right? You can be challenged. So, and you go to a good public school. Sometimes the schools that we're going into, or the districts that we find ourselves, because the United States has districts, and depending on the district that you find yourself in, but if you're into a good district, the public schools or your magnet schools, or we have public schools, magnet schools, private schools, and all these different types of schools in the United States. Okay, when I went there too, I thought that the education system was this universal one, but it is also segregated in the United States. The education system in the United States is also segregated. So you have the districts, and if you're in a good district and you have good schools, you can get a competitive education as of that you get in the Caribbean, right? But if you're going into a school that many of us, particularly predominantly people of color, find ourselves in, Black people, many of these schools are not the best. Many of these schools are not the best. And people have been to like Howard University, and they've been to like a very good state school at University of Maryland, and they talk about the difference. In fact, when I went to the States, and I went to Howard University first, right? That's where I got my BA and MA and whatever. When I went to the University of Maryland, College Park, I saw the difference. Just going on the campus and looking around, it was just different, a different culture. And when I looked at the curriculum that I was doing at Howard versus the curriculum I saw at University of Maryland, College Park, the University of College Park, Maryland was very world-class, very intense, and very, engaging program, right? And it was what I did at Howard was, I would say, was inferior. Right? So everything, it's different. And I complained to when I was at Howard, and people said, oh, this guy's complaining a lot. But the fact is that it is what it is. The United States education is also very segregated, and it depends on what school you go to, right? Yeah, so that is it. That's what it happens. Because again, U.S. is school districts. They have their schools in districts. And if you are not from a good community, likely your schools are not going to be good. Why do you think Black people move out of Black community and they go into white communities? Because they know that if they're going to educate their children, they have to be in a good school district so that their kids can get a good education. The child said he was bored. Yeah, I'm saying it can be. But if he were going to go to another school, and probably a private magnet school, he probably would be challenged. So how come they don't recognize the Caribbean certificate? Yeah, because each jurisdiction, they just, in many cases too, we can't blame them. As I'm saying, that you have doctors who have graduated at the top of their class in the Caribbean, and they're brilliant people, they're world class, but they might not have gotten some of the practical training because we lack some of the resources, some of the equipment, the medical equipment. And so they have to go through that system and a different system, the way how they treat their patients and all of that stuff. So that is why, just like how you might go to a Harvard, university that is top tier, and some schools might tell you that you have to do some things over if you go to the Caribbean, so we have different levels of education. In fact, in Cuba, where now the doctors, some people are contemplating that some of the doctors probably would have to go back to Trinidad or to go back to Jamaica because of what is happening with the US. Some schools in the Caribbean are saying, in the Anglo-speaking, Caribbean territories, are looking at their transcripts from those doctors who are coming back from Cuba and see how they can do the shift around, because they might have to redo some classes. Even though Cuba produces excellent doctors, it doesn't mean therefore that if the student doesn't finish his degree, or maybe if he or she finishes his degree in Cuba, that they might not have to be assessed when they go back to Trinidad or when they go back to Jamaica and certified in that system. In fact, there's a broadcaster in Jamaica who she went to Cuba and she did veterinarian science, right? And when she went back to Jamaica, she was not accepted. They told her that, they could not certify her in Jamaica to work, so it happens. I thought Howard was one of the top, it is one of the top HBCUs, but what I did, what I studied when it was not at the top at all. It was really, really low standards in comparison to what you would probably have gotten at the University of the West Indies or what you'd have gotten at the University of Maryland College Park. When I saw the level of complexity and the curriculum at University of Maryland College Park, night and day. It was night and day in comparison to the degree that Howard was offering. Again, you must understand that the type of students, particularly then, that Howard received in comparison to what Maryland received, again coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds. We have to understand that. The same thing happens in the Caribbean. So I'm saying to you, a person that goes to a top school in Trinidad and gets the 25 subjects and Guyana came from a very good primary school, and their scores were 90s, and their scores were not going to be like 50s and 40s, so we are segregated as well. I remember some American friends said they not sure how we in the Caribbean can do 15 subjects in one semester, right? And that is what I think, because we were forced, and don't get me wrong, we're structured too. And when we're doing math, we have a math notebook, and we have to make sure we take our notes and whatever. And that's how we're able to do 15 subjects. And that's what we need to tell them, that we can do the 10 subjects and the 15 subjects because we're structured. They are not structured, and they need to learn structure. That is what, because our schools are like militarized schools, and it's good. It was militarized. We didn't like it when we were going there, right? It was too strict and all of that stuff, but it helped us eventually. And that's what I'm saying to people, even now I'm here in Jamaica, that, some students don't like their hairdo. They have to do, they want to wear these fashions. I believe in the structure. Let it be, when you leave the school, you can do whatever you want to do. But structure for young people is very good. Structure, or young people, parents, your young people need structure. Let them get up in the mornings and help you around the house. Don't just have them just sitting by and you're feeding them and think that they're going to be nice. Look at my nice little, boy and girl. Teach them structure. They must get up, know that they have their chores and they have their homework and whatever responsibility that you should give to them. It will help them in their latter years. Don't spoil them. And the same thing they do in the States, spoiling these children at the school and not giving them structure. And at the end of the day, they suffer. All right? Because we're giving them too much freedom. Want to say for 1 year. Yeah. So I'm not saying Howard University is not good. Howard University is a top HBCU. It is, right? I'm not saying that it's not good. And shout out to all my folks at Howard University. But we must understand also that they perhaps are not going to get the same students at the University of Maryland, Georgetown, and University of, George Washington University would be getting. All right? They don't. Right? Just like how the University of the West Indies is not going to accept certain students coming from certain schools. Same thing, right? So that is how the system is. And at the end of the day, I must say in the Caribbean, we have to be applauded because some of us really come from very poor circumstances. And there is no way that we could, compare to somebody with more resources. And we go to these schools and we do well. We compete with some guys who have tutors and their lives are better economically. Some of us barely have electricity, and we really compete with them, and we master and we do well, we come out on top. So we have to give our Caribbean students, African students, credit. And not just saying, oh, victimhood, oh, well, the person who has, helper and tutor, I could not have done well. We don't play the game. We say, I can do it. Even though that person has more resources, I can do it, and I can do better than he, or can do better than she. And that is how we operate. And I think that's a very healthy characteristic to have. I remember when boys had to cut their hair, right? Now I see boys going to school with cornrows and girls with long wigs. Absolutely. And I believe that they should not. Freedom, yes, but at the end of the day, kids have to have structure, right? And structure, they may not like it. We didn't like it, right? Many of the things that our principals did when we were going to school, we didn't like it. But that is the crux of the matter. When we went to schools like the United States, and we were, we had to abide by their rules too. And people talk about rules in schools. They have rules in the corporate world too, right? You can't dress a certain any way when you go to Wall Street. You can't dress any way when you go to Wall Street, even though you're a big man. They tell you how you need to dress. You have dress code. So nothing is wrong in having a dress code. And one day we need to talk about that on the live. We need to have, what do you call it now? Dress code and discipline, conduct, way of behaving on the job, right? Some jobs don't allow you to, wear wigs and maybe I shouldn't say wigs, but, dress a certain way, put it that way, right? So what is wrong if the schools have dress code? Right? Once they are not discriminating and telling you that you are lesser. And two, I believe the dress code should be neutral. Why? Because what if I don't have enough money to put my daughter and to buy wigs, and they're going to be competing who has the best wig, right? Who has the best hairdo? And these hairdo can be very, very expensive. So it's better to have them dressed simply and modestly so that people are not in competition. That's why we have school uniforms, right? So they don't have to be dressing in civilian clothes every day, and they're competing who has the best blouse, the best shirt, the best jeans, how much they paid for it. So we all look the same, and it makes us look more inclusive. And one does not feel inferior to the other, as sometimes they do in the States, right? So what we do here in the Caribbean, I think that we have some good values that we are shedding now, and it's going to cost us. It's going to cost us, right? So we have to be careful. Very good comments. Now, what about the war? Nobody is talking. We're trying to avoid that. The war topic in terms of what are we doing as we come to a close? What are we doing to prepare for what is ahead? As Mr. Corbin says, as Fred says, we are going to see escalation. The war is going to escalate. In probably the next 48 hours, the war is definitely going to escalate. And what are we doing? Make sure you like the live, you're sharing the live so that we can have others join the live or liking the live so the algorithm will send the video. And I'm sorry, I did not, I thought when I set up the live, it was actually set for the 18th. I thought I had it for the 19th and I had it for the 18th. Oh, Lord. So, I don't know if that affected the distribution tonight. I don't know what's going on in my mind. But, yeah, there was a very good conversation with Mr. Corbin. So if we don't have any more comments or please make sure you also, if you can, you contribute to the live. You can send any donations to my Cash App so that, we can have the program, we can aid the program in continuing. Any other question, any comment before we bid each other goodbye? All right, so since we have nothing more to say, I think that Mr. Pereira will be on Tuesday. I think probably I make it at the live at 4 on Tuesday. Can we come at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday, when Mr. Pereira will be giving his perspective of what is happening in Iran and also in Guyana. Let's deal with the war on your next program. Yes, I'm definitely dealing with the war, and I'll be looking, Mr. Pereira will be here. and he will, he likes to talk about that. So he'll be talking. He can't make it tomorrow, so tomorrow is Monday. So he told me on Tuesday at 4 p.m. he will be here, okay, for that. What I realize is that they use astrology and maths in some of these wars, very scripted and evil. Sorry, I'm late. Yes. Thank you very much for joining, DP. Yeah, they do that, and that is sometimes the wars are definitely scripted. And but I shouldn't say sometimes, they are usually scripted because wars are profitable and they want a number of people to die. They like to see that. Some of these people like to see us dying people and suffering, and then they can move their agenda. Another thing I forgot to say while Mr. Corbin was here is that all wars, as we know, Africa was divided because of the continent was divided up. So all wars also redesign the map of the world, right? So, as we know that in African countries, you didn't have like what we call now these countries. They had different names in the past, and they were part of, whatever country that they've divided them up into. So the same thing is happening in the Middle East now. They are dividing up these countries, and very soon we might have, different names, or they might separate different countries into a different zone. As Mr. Corbin said, that Kuwait was once part of Iraq. Okay, so we have to look at what is happening too. Are they redesigning the Middle East? And will some territories lose some part of their country to another country? Whatever. These are things that we have to look at very, very carefully. Yeah, they want to break up Iran. Yeah, as every war you have, it results in the redesigning. And I forgot to have made that point earlier on, but this is a crucial point. So basically harvesting our energy, use that and makes them feel more powerful, especially when we die. Yeah, and definitely they are moving into another form of energy. We don't know what their renewable energy will be, but they're moving towards that. The war is about that. Make no bones about it. Trump is just rushing from one war to the next, right? And it all has to do with oil. That's the main commodity that they want to arrest. He's now suggesting that he wants Iran to destroy its 400 kilometers of enriched uranium, but that is not going to happen. Iran says that they're not going to do it. And this is my point too. Why are they back and forth when they know Iran says that we're not going to give up our, enriched uranium territory. And this is back and forth. At one point in time, the strait was open, then the next day it was closed, and it's just back and forth. Eventually, things don't work out, and we hear that somebody's kidnapped or somebody's killed. So these wars they are definitely engineered, because what they're telling us about, as Mr. Corbin says, these are phony negotiations. They're not real. How can you send Witkoff and Jared Kushner, who are not experienced statesmen, right, and diplomats, to negotiate with these established, countries like Iran? And Iran is a sophisticated country. The people there are very intelligent and sophisticated people. And to have Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff to have gone there was an insult to them, right? Was an insult to the Iranian officials. But that is how the United States is operating now. They're operating by force and not through diplomacy. So if you don't agree, then just when Trump speaks, he sounds like somebody on like a country, what they call it, some of these country movie, a Western movie, those Western movies, and they just shoot and whatever. And that's what the United States essentially is right now. It's not a country of great civilization. It has really declined in terms of civility. It's no longer. It doesn't practice civility anymore. It's not civilized. Sad, but it's true. And at this point, I expect anything to happen. I expect anything to happen from now on. Any other points? Some great points you're giving about this war thing, and we have to explore it more because it is something that is going to affect every man, woman, and child. Everybody will be impacted by this, from the United States to the Caribbean. We are going to be impacted. Already we are being impacted. But as Mr. Corbyn said, I'm saying too, this is engineered, and whatever is the crisis that they have created is going to fall right into their hands to exploit us. Okay, so this is where we are now, and we just have to get our acts together. It's bigger than Trump, right? But he's a useful idiot, and he likes to be the face of the empire. He loves it. That's his joy. He has been, this is his dream job, right? And it came eventually when he was in his old age too. Most of the things Trump are saying, he's not smart enough to know. You're correct. He's just, as Mr. Corbyn said too, he's just following a script, as Kamala predecessor is following in Trinidad. Just following, and all of them, not only Trump and Mrs. Kamala predecessor, but all of them follow a script, and he's following his script, right? But it makes him feel very important. DP saying, I did some research and found out they believe in eschatology and use that in these wars. But what eschatology? Every month I find out something new, and these evil people really eye-opening. Yeah, they're using a false eschatology to say that this is what they want, and because look at how Hexeth is making this like a religious war. Right, that he has to use the sword in order to destroy bad people, to destroy evil people. That's what he's essentially saying. And notice that J.D. Vance, challenging the Pope, said that, oh, so when we actually used the sword against the Nazis, right, and we won, what was, wasn't that using the sword? So they are justifying their war, that they're making the case, or they're trying to make the case, because they've failed, right? So they're trying to make the case that the Iranians are evil. So they have to use weapons to destroy them, right? That is exactly what people like the J.D. Vance and the Marco Rubios, the Pete Hegseth, and Trump himself are saying. Whether Muslim, Christian, right, or Jewish, they're using these. But the thing about it is that you can't just put eschatology in one box. Remember, that what type of eschatology? Is the Catholic eschatology? Is it a Protestant eschatology? Is the Baptist eschatology? Is the Seventh Adventist? Or these religions are complicated, and you have different sects and what we call denominations. Right, so we have to be careful now and not just put them, because as we can see, even the Muslim, you have the Shia and the Shiites, right? But the Shia and the other ones, right? I think the Shiites, and they have different ideologies, right? The Protestants in Christian, among Christian denominations, they have a different, eschatology from Baptist, so we have to look at them in separately. However, Cuba does not have oil. Well, if Jamaica has oil, Yardi, if and I'm hearing that Haiti might have, I doubt that that Cuba doesn't have oil. I would think it has oil too. If Haiti has oil, and it seems like it does, if Jamaica has any, and it seems like it's possible that it does too, I would think Cuba does have oil. The massive island is the largest island in the Caribbean Sea, so it's likely that it has oil. But I can't say it does or doesn't, because I don't have that sort of knowledge. But I'm just saying, if Jamaica has, and it seems like we do have some amount, I'm not sure how much, the extent of the amount, and I'm hearing that Cuba definitely has, not Cuba, but Haiti has, then I would think Cuba has. I think most Caribbean islands have oil, right? And I think Fred said that even Barbados has. I think most Caribbean islands have oil and resources, whether in the water or on land. And I think so too. I think that is what they're going after. And they're using it to control us right now, or resources to control us. Yeah, I agree. But if Cuba doesn't have oil, it has other resources, right? It has other resources. The U.S. has always wanted that island for a long, long time. Even during slavery, do you know that the United States wanted to make Cuba, an extended portion of the U.S. South? Yeah, that was debated in Congress sometimes before the Civil War. Do you know that? Sometime before the Civil War, just shortly before the Civil War, it was a very even the DR, the Dominican Republic, right? They wanted to make part of the U.S. and to, to have it expanded, the slave states to be expanded to these countries, right? But Cuba was definitely under their watch for many, many years. So something is in Cuba, right? We just don't know. Something is, it's a massive island, so I would think it has resources there. Yeah. So it is what it is. So I guess we can stop here, or we want to continue. Do we have any more comments? Any? And sorry for starting. I did ask you, I did start at 7 tonight, just to have you come in. I haven't seen a lot of you on the thing tonight, but fair enough. We had, I think, 40 being the maximum. But we need to come out so we can join the live, so we can have the algorithm send out our videos, so we can have some traction, gain some traction on YouTube, because these messages need to be sent out, right? So we can get our people to be exposed to a different level of thinking. As long as we have a central bank, that does not belong to us, and embassies throughout, correct? Throughout the Caribbean, we will not have so-called freedom, correct? This is the best, probably the best point for the entire night. Unless we have our own central bank, because these are the central banks, like it or not, they're the ones behind the wars. It's profitable, right? So if we don't have our own central banks, then we are not free. And it's right. The best point for the entire night. Haiti has a ton of natural resources. They should have been better as far as economics, and that's why they're controlled. Right, and that's why they're controlled. And remember now that, as Stephen is saying, if we don't have our own central banks, so even if we have lots of natural resources, then it still will result in the fact that we're going to still be poor, because they're going to control our natural resources. Okay, and that is how it is. Nothing is changing. The world is the same. Nothing new under the sun. And Marcus Garvey was telling us, and we didn't listen, you have to be self-sufficient, you have to be self-reliant, and we think that we have to depend on our Western colonial masters. Now, nothing is wrong to collaborate with them and to have some partnership with them, but at our terms, for our interests, and this is where it's different. But our leaders are not doing it as as a matter of partnering with them. They're doing it in a sense where they're dominating us, and they continue to dominate us and make us poorer, and that's what we're facing now. And we are enslaved. We are on a plantation. When I was at Howard University, there was a professor there from Trinidad, and whenever I used to say hi to you, he said, "Yeah, hi Andrew, what's going on the plantation?" We are on a plantation, right? We are on a plantation. That's what we are on. So whether you're in the United States or you're living in Barbados or Jamaica, you're definitely on a plantation. Yeah. All right. So we guess we can call it a night. You have to go to work tomorrow, to school, and you have other appointments that you have to meet. So we will see each other again on Tuesday when Mr. Pereira will be here. Make sure you come out to the live. I'll make it at 4 p.m. Mr. Pereira can attend the meeting at 4. So we'll make it at 4. Is that okay? 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Mr. Pereira on Tuesday. I'll set it up so you can make sure you share the live before we come, so that many people can come and listen to what Mr. Gerald Pereira has to say about the war and what is happening. He says lots of things are happening, so I'm sure he wants to come and share that with us on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Is that okay? The gangs in Haiti are now trying to take over our cultural vast lands. I wonder who told them to target you. That is in my mind too. They're controlled. They're controlled. So good night, and we'll talk another time. Be at the live on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Is that okay? So I see you. Bye.